Bill wants to
Please rise
give Bill
and worship
so,
the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor.
Good evening, members and guests. Would you like to sit down? Well, we've got a few guests tonight and quite a big agenda, so we can just crack on. Okay, so apologies, Manjit.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Bath, Councillor Chopping, Councillor Haynes, Councillor Kate Haynes, Councillor Mike Haynes, Councillor Holdsworth, Councillor Louise Sumner, Councillor Sargent, Councillor Weeks and Councillor Wood.
Thank you very much. Minutes, members. Are members happy with the minutes? Please show. Okay, I'll sign those. Okay, are there any declarations of interest tonight? No declarations of interest. Okay, so we're moving on now to Mayor's announcement. It's going to be slightly different tonight because this is the first night I'm going. Sorry.
Put your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. I was hoping I might get away with that. It's going to be a bit different tonight because we're making our first Mayor's Roll of Honour Award, and we have two people here from the community, and I would like to do that now if that's possible. Okay, we have Sajif Banzai, and she's initiated and managed and still runs a Punjabi language classes, which are very successful, which she's done for 35 years. After identifying the need in the community to help to retain its culture and identity, this coupled with the fact that it's not available locally as a mainstream curriculum subject anywhere else in the area. As a qualified teacher with a PGCE from Reading University and ample teaching experience, she has developed this opportunity of teaching of Punjabi to the community, both children and adults, on a voluntary basis while juggling a full-time job and bringing up 3 children. The language is taught to GCSE, and it is a great pride that they can say over the last 35 years, over 150 children have taken the qualification. At present, there are 50 children in your class, I believe. Most of the children from the Punjabi classes have progressed, and many are qualified professionals, lawyers, dentists and doctors. They now make use of Punjabi at their workplace, when the opportunity presents itself, and in turn, they are able to pass it on to the next generation. So I'd like to take this opportunity to make this award to you. Thank you. You have a small badge, okay, and a roll of honour. Thank you. My next candidate is Janet Woodruff. Janet is a very active member in the community. Janet distributes a community newsletter for the community flats and the Loddon Reach for Shinfield Parish Council to the residents of Shinfield Rise Estate every 6 to 8 weeks, rain or shine. She has supported many of Woking Borough's activities, and they are run on the estate by either encouraging people to attend or assisting with the active running of these events. She is a person that almost everyone in her local community knows, through her pleasant and helpful attitude. Janet is a person with a very positive and proactive approach and is always keen to lend her assistance wherever it's needed. It gives me great pleasure to give you your roll of honour in your home. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. My second announcement, this is unusual, isn't it, Mayor's announcement. The Council is embarking on a process to engage with residents on future priorities for the borough. I would urge all members of the public to take part by completing the survey, which can be found on our Council website. The survey closes on the 30th of September, so there's not long left if you want to have a say in what goes on in the borough in the future. Another announcement, we are losing a long-serving officer who's given many years of excellent service to the Council. That officer is Josie Rack, who has worked for the Council for 20 years and leaves at the end of the month to take up a new position as the Chief Executive at Slough. I would just like to say thank you on behalf of the Council and on a personal basis for all the help and support you have given me in my various roles. I would also like to wish you the best for the future in your new role. Thank you, Josie. Okay, and one more, which is the Mayor's Masked Ball. Now, probably not a bad thing, Masked Ball for us all. It's on Saturday the 9th of March. It's going to be held at Sindlesham Court, which is in Mulrose, Sindlesham. So get that in your diary, everybody. And I look forward to seeing a lot of you there. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to item number 38, public question time. Public question time. There's 30 minutes, supplementaries are allowed. I must remind everybody that questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and these will be timed. And likewise, the answers will also be timed. So, first question.
I'd like to ask the question standing in my name, please.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jenny. I remember Thames Valley Park Station when I did this role last time, and I had various discussions with Mark Moon at the time. But I think, as you're aware, Network Rail decided they didn't want to have another stop too close to Reading or between Reading and Twyford. So unfortunately, we were unable to get the station in place. However, there is a station, new station, Green Park, that is will be available next year. And if Grainsey is decided to go to the plan upload site, there will be a station at Grainsey. However, there is nothing I'm aware of on the lines through Wokingham to either London or Guildford, nor is there anything I understand on the line from Reading to Paddington. So that's the situation as far as stations are concerned. In connection with interchange and modal shift, I will direct you to CP10 and CP6 in the 2010 core strategy, which I understand deals with the principles around modal shift and interchange. We are undertaking work in connection with potential park and ride at Cock Beach. We have been working, again, this goes back to the ARC, I suppose, a bridge over the canal of Reading, which I believe has some problems with planning. But in principle, that will provide a quicker bus service from Thames Valley Park or into Thames Valley Park and from the Waterside Centre into Reading. And in Chinfield, there are plans for round-robin bus services connecting Chinfield development into Reading, and there have been improvements in the bus services from Arkfield to Reading and also through to the new Lexington development to Bracknell. So I think we are providing and looking to provide opportunities for modal shift, and as well as new rail facilities where we can.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you for that answer. I was particularly interested, as I'm sure you're aware, of the proposal for the station in Thames Valley Park, which was, I don't really know what happened to it, just kind of disappeared. And as you suggested, it was said that it couldn't happen because there was no room on the rail network at that time for trains to stop in the business park, even though this was part of the Section 106 agreement, as I understand, by Oracle, to provide a station. I'd be interested to know where that money actually went, because it's certainly didn't on the station. However, the reason I'm asking the question is because surely the recent introduction of electrification, together with the even more recent National Digital Railway Strategy, which is intended to give more space on rail networks, surely these initiatives have now made the stopping of trains at a station in the Thames Valley Business Park a possibility which should be properly investigated.
As you say, I recall the Thames Valley Park Station and the saga around it, and something like 15 million that was supposed to be spent on it. I have no idea whether you received it, so I can't help you with that one. I don't think at present there are any plans by the rail operator or the Network Rail to be in favour of a new station at Thames Valley Park. I've heard of no discussions that have been had by anyone with anyone, so I don't think I would suggest that it's likely anytime soon. I will ask the question around as I'm talking to the rail operators, but and if I hear anything positive, I'll let you know. But I believe I have to take it on that basis.
Thank you. I think it should come from the Borough Council, a suggestion. That's what I was asking about the policy.
Thank you. Petra Angel? He's not here. Okay, question for Pauline Henderson. They'll have to be a written reply. Paul Fishwood.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Executive Member for the Environment, Leisure and Libraries. My following question is, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs launched a consultation during July and August 2018 related to the planned UK Clean Air Strategy and detailed National Air Pollution Control Programme that is due to be published in March 2019. Could you inform me what response Wokingham Borough Council gave to this consultation? And that's the actual consultation if you haven't seen it.
Thank you very much for your question. The Public Protection Partnership, which represents us as far as such matters is concerned, they have not responded to this particular consultation, as we provided a response to an earlier similar consultation on the National Nitrogen Dioxide Action Plan. Previously, we provided information on what measures to tackle air pollution have worked well and the challenges of implementation of them. This was requested from each authority to inform DEFRA's development of their strategy. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Sedgwick?
I do, thank you very much. It's extremely disappointing that the Borough Council has not taken part in this consultation. It is actually different to the previous one on nitrogen. This will help shape the forthcoming strategies that the government are looking at to launch in March 2019. Air pollution in the UK kills approximately 45,000 people prematurely every year. So when will the Borough Council take air quality seriously? By tackling the sources of these emissions, especially nitrogen dioxide, which mainly comes from transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Borough Council does take air pollution very seriously. There are a number of monitoring sites, as you're aware, around the borough, so we can keep an eye on what the levels are. There are a couple of areas that were above the desired limits in the centre of Wokingham and the centre of Twyford, and there is an action plan in place for each of those areas. So that's been in place now for about a year. So we're undertaking actions associated with those areas to bring them well down. We are monitoring across the piece, and the latest information I have is that across the piece the pollutant levels are coming down slightly. As you're aware, the main issue of nitrogen dioxide as far as vehicles is concerned is with diesel vehicles. A lot of more modern vehicles are now fitted with devices to reduce the amount of nitrogen dioxide that come out of the exhaust. A lot of them are also fitted with particulate filters. The fuel economy of diesel vehicles has gone up enormously in the last few years. So a lot of that's pushing things in the right direction. The government's got a big initiative on electric vehicles now, and I think we'll see a lot of pressure for electric vehicles in the centre of major cities and towns. So, for example, bus companies could do a lot to cut down the amount of pollution by moving to electric or hybrid vehicles and full vehicles. So we do take it very seriously, and it's an issue that I'm actually very interested in. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew McDougall.
Thank you. My question is to the Executive Member for Highways and Transport. Early is blighted by illegal and antisocial parking, with all of the associated problems. Existing and additional signage is necessary, but not sufficient. The civil enforcement officers who, from time to time, patrol in Early are effective, but unable to visit problem locations as often as required. Could a full-time civil enforcement officer be allocated exclusively and permanently to Early to help tackle these serious parking problems?
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. Since the introduction of CPE in October 2017, 405 days of operation, we've carried out 1,581 patrols in Early, with 938 contraventions. I suppose that probably means we issued tickets, 938 people. This equates to 3.9 Early locations visited per day of operation. So you've had your fair share of resources across the borough. Whilst we can never guarantee we will be at the right location every day, we do what we can with the resources that we have available. As part of the CPE contract, there's an opportunity for community groups and/or town and parish councils to fund additional patrols in their area. This is subject to a contractor being able to resource this, and they have people available. If this is something you would like to discuss in more detail, the parking team will be able to assist, and if you want to talk to me about that, very happy to talk to you. However, there is a cost, and we will be looking to Early Town Council to contribute. The full-time person would cost about £37,000 per annum. You may not want somebody full-time, but what you would like to use your money on, we would be happy to assist you.
Mr. Nicholas, did you have a supplementary question?
I do. I'm told that civil enforcement officers try to visit a school in Early only once in a 5 to 6 week period. Given the ongoing extent of parking abuse around our schools and other locations, how can this be good enough?
I think, as you have commented, there's a lot of issues in Early, and obviously the parking enforcement officers have to cover the whole of the area. If there are particular black spots that you would wish me to pick up and perhaps seek to get some prioritisation, very happy to do that. I'm going to go back to my previous question. If there's a number of things that you want a lot more time spent on, then let's have a conversation about how that can be dealt with and how we can fund it.
Thank you, Anthony. Rachel Bishop.
Thank you. My question is for the Executive Member for Environment, Leisure and Libraries. There are no litter bins on Barkham Road between Woking Railway Station and the bus stop on Barkham Road. The bins at each end of this stretch, on the railway bridge and bus stop, are small and are hidden from view if you're walking away from the town. There are also no bins between Wellington Road and Barkham Road for people taking this route out of town over Town Hill Crossing. As a result, we have a litter problem along both of these routes. The bins are often overflowing on a Monday morning, and people living along Barkham Road get fast food wrappers, bottles and cans in their gardens. There's a similar litter problem along the Town Hill shortcut with litter including broken glass being dropped on the bridge and in the Ormond Road Park. I've sent some photos showing the problem to the councillor. Can the council commit to reviewing the problem and providing adequate litter bins?
Thank you very much for your question, and thanks for the photograph. The picture always paints 1,000 words. I mean, it's certainly clear from your photographs that there is an issue of throwing bins and so on. And I have asked officers to look at this, and we'll also review the litter picking frequency to see if adjusting that would help as well. Thank you.
Rachel, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. I'm concerned by the fact that things have got to a state that the bins are overflowing regularly, which isn't just unsightly but could lead to public health issues such as rat infestation. Could the council please tell me what systems are in place to monitor problems of this type and to ensure action is taken in good time to prevent public hygiene problems?
Certainly the contractor frequently empties bins. In your case, it was a question whether it's frequently or not. So have a look at that. There are over 1,000 litter bins around the borough that we collect from. So it's reviewed in that way, and when something like this is raised as an issue, our officers go out and have a look as well at the issue, not just leaving it to the contractor to see if the bins are in the right place, the right size. It is under review, and I'm help the people like you give is good. Thank you.
Sarah Kerr.
Hi, this is for the Executive Member for Regeneration. How are the public consulted about the new layout of the marketplace, including the type and colour of stone, the disabled parking and loading layout, the lack of proper curbs, the rather expensive looking golden studs, and in particular the use of the same colour paving stone for pedestrian crossings?
Good evening, thank you for your question. There's been significant public consultation and engagement which has led to the new marketplace design, and this dates back more than 10 years. The initial engagement took place in Wokingham Town Centre workshops in 2007, and that looked at the long-term vision for the town. Further detail was added through workshops that took place January and June in 2008, and that led to the Wokingham Town Centre Development Guide of December 2008. One of the key principles that emerged from the public engagement was the need for an uncluttered public space that encouraged pedestrian access. And further consultation, including public workshop, took place in September 2009, and that was ahead of the production of the Town Centre Master Plan supplementary document of 2010. The Master Plan set out the key principles of the development, and through consultation it was generally acknowledged that the former paving was poor quality, uneven, uncoordinated, and the road bed was particularly slippery when wet, and generally cluttered and detracted from the historic character of the marketplace. Further engagement took place as more design evolved, and this included various individuals and interest groups. An initial workshop then in April 2015 was followed by 3 more detailed sessions in 2017. 2 of those workshops were specifically for individuals and organisations representing those with various forms of disability, including Guide Dogs for the Blind, CLASP, Wokingham Healthcare, Alzheimer's Society. The input from them was crucial in informing the design of the marketplace. For example, it highlighted the importance of retaining controlled crossings for people with visual impairments, which were retained in the design as a result. While level surfaces are preferred by most people with restricted mobility, people with visual impairments who rely on a guide dog or cane need a discernible change in the level to identify the carriageway. Hence it was decided that crossing points, both signalised and courtesy crossings, would be level with the pavement and identified with tactile paving. In terms of the choice of York stone, this was selected following an engagement feedback and highlighted the general dislike of the old red brick and support for more natural material that would provide a neutral backdrop to the town hall.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to ask a second question, supplementary question?
I would. You've made reference to consulting people with visual impairment. The Department of Transport has guidance on the use of tactile paving surfaces, and it actually states in there that contrasts in colour and tone should be used to accentuate the presence of certain key features. And also it says older visually impaired people and people who have lost their sight through certain medical conditions may well have reduced sensitivity in their feet, and it's therefore important that textures warning of potential hazards are rigorous enough to be detectable by most people. Was this guidance consulted in the design of the marketplace regeneration, given that the blister studs are barely detectable for the average person through the soles of their shoes? Blister studs do not contrast in colour much from the surrounding area. The colour of the pedestrian crossings is the same as the pavement, and the curbs are the same grey colour as the row of grey bricks lining the side of the road.
Thank you again for that. I can assure you that all the consultations we carried out took all that into account, and indeed we were advised by a number of the groups that they wanted those tactile studs. So I'm afraid at this stage that's why we've gone forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Norman Jorgensen, the Executive Member for Environment, Leisure and Libraries, the following questions. And in his reply, I'd like Norman please to speak a little louder and clearer. I'm finding it very difficult to hear you over here. And please will you tell me, with a simple answer, if the black boxes that are used throughout the borough for recycling are actually recyclable?
Thank you, Ben. I shall hear your voice in the track of this microphone. It's not possible for the black boxes to be processed through our curbside collection service. We communicated this to our customers when we extended the recycling service earlier this year to include pots, tubs and trays. If, on the other hand, a resident has a specific problem disposing of a damaged black box, then we'll always help facilitate the removal if the resident contacts us.
You won't be surprised.
No.
Earlier on in the year, Norman, as you know, I was a member of this council and I wasn't aware of any consultation or offer to the public to recycle the boxes. However, they are recyclable. Having spoken to the company that manufacture them, if they're returned to them, or I'm not sure whether REC have got the equipment, if you chip them, you can melt them down again and recycle them. And that to me would seem a very sensible thing to do with them. I've had a lot of questions from members of the public about this, and they suggested that if it's because they're black, we change the colour to a different colour. I don't think that's the issue, and certainly the company don't think it's the issue. But I would suggest that this council make more effort to make those boxes recyclable, even if it means returning them to the manufacturer.
I agree, it would make sense if they were recyclable more locally. So certainly we'll look at it for future contracts for placing for black boxes. I think you're right, it's not the fact that these are black, it's the type of plastic that they're made from.
Okay, well that's public question time over. To move on to number 39, petitions. Are there any petitions?
Yes.
Gary Carroll? Gary?
Oh. So I speak first?
Sorry, I haven't put it down. Just hang on a moment. I'll take you after. I'll take the others. Okay, Mr. Stevens.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. My name is Max Stevenson and I'm a Hurst Parish Councillor. I'm here to submit a petition signed by the residents of Hurst and those who use the local amenities such as the church, the Castle Pub, bowling club located in the central part of Churchill and the school down the road. The petition is asking for the council to approve a speed reduction along the whole length of Churchill from 60 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour and a 20 mile an hour limit on the central built up section. The majority of those who signed the petition were shocked to know the speed limit is currently 60 miles an hour. Very unsafe for this rural road. Many A roads throughout the borough have lower limits. Churchill has 4 dangerous and blind sharp corners, so no footpaths, and it has a 6 foot by 6 inch width restriction with signs at both ends. I've spoken to the police at 3 Mile Cross and they don't have the resources to monitor this road and only record instances where injury was sustained. Over the past few years, there have been several speeding incidents resulting in damaged cars and near misses with pedestrians and cars. Unfortunately, these are not recorded by the police. Residents of church cottages in the middle of the S Bend have had their fences damaged and replaced several times over the last few years because vehicles have crashed into them. During last year, many villagers have commented that there has been a noticeable increase in traffic through Hurst and especially Church Hill. The only safe speed going through the central section is about 20 miles an hour. I suspect the increased traffic volumes are due to the new houses being built around Wokingham. There's been a huge response to this petition. In total, there are 455 signatures, a remarkable response for such a small road. Especially when a ward issue, which this is, only requires 10 signatures. I would also like to include a copy of the letter in this petition that was sent to Charlotte Haytham-Taylor by Hurst Member of Parliament, the Right Honourable Theresa May MP, who wholeheartedly supports this petition and agrees the speed reduction would be a welcome safety improvement. I and the people who have signed this petition urge the Council to approve this speed reduction as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I believe the next one is Graham Dexter and Chris Kellinger.
No, sorry, can I come over there? Or? Oh, I got the microphone. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Heiliger, Councillor, Barkham Parish Councillor. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. As the petition organiser, is it on?
That was fine. That was fine.
It is. Okay. As a petition organiser, I submit to you, Mr. Mayor, this substantial petition of over 4,000 signatures supported by Barkham Parish Council on behalf of the residents of Barkham and the surrounding parishes who signed to facilitate a debate about overdevelopment in Barkham. I'll start by saying there is a considerable unease about how the borough is managing excessive development. You may respond that no decision has been made, but many hairs are running which need to be managed. In collecting signatures, Graham and I stood outside shops and schools and met literally hundreds of residents from a broad range of backgrounds. Two very strong themes emerged. One, excessive development. The overwhelming view was enough is enough. Two, residents' views tend to be overlooked. We were constantly told that we were wasting our time because the borough does not listen, the borough does not care, and the borough has its own agenda. Surely this is not how you wish to be seen.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I have three simple messages in the short time I have left. One, Barkham is a rural parish with countryside not dissimilar to that designated as Green Belt. The Arborfield SDL will more than double its size, and an additional 1,000 homes in Barkham Square will actually treble its size. Traffic is already a problem, and that's before the full impact of the SDL is experienced. And travelling to Wokingham will not be eased by the planned infrastructure. In the Arborfield and Barkham neighbourhood plan survey, 98% of the respondees stated that the countryside was much valued, with the separation areas between settlements being very important. The SDL was sold as being a separate community, but in contravention thereof, the borough is now considering filling in the gaps. 3. Barkham Square is accessible only by narrow country roads and lanes. It's not a sustainable location. This is a developer landowner-led option that begs a single question from parishioners: why Barkham again? Charlotte Haytham-Taylor, as leader, you have been quoted many times as wanting the borough to be seen as listening to residents. This, I now think, is a great opportunity to respond and deliver what you are promoting in the vision plan. It just came out recently, I believe. But not with platitudes like we'll give this careful thought, but in ways that demonstrate you have really listened by putting in place actions and resolutions that show, 1, you can successfully manage the 5-year land supply. Okay, I'm finishing. 2, you will deliver a balanced approach to housing to getting traffic around Woking without destroying the countryside. 3, above all, you're going to address the people of Barkham and our neighbours with genuine solutions, not wishful aspirations. Charlotte, I hope you've listened and you will please respond this time. Thank you all for listening.
Gary, back to you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a petition with 1,688 signatures, and it comes with a covering note, which I'll read out. Dear Gary, just a note of explanation with regard to our petition. The petition was originally started to object to the development of 2 fields at the rear of Oaklands Road, Shinfield, but the support from the residents group appeared that it is not the only restricted to this particular development, but there was a wider protest to the overdevelopment in the borough. The vast majority of residents expressed strong feelings against excessive development of what is happening to our communities. Thank you again for your kind offer to present a petition with 1,688 signatures. The wording on the petition is: proposed housing development south of Cutbush Lane and north of Arkfield Road. We, the undersigned, wish to express our objecting to the proposed development south of Cutbush Lane and north of Arkfield Road, Shinfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. If the petitioners wish to leave, they can leave now. You don't have to hang on to the end of the meeting. That doesn't mean you, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. If you could hurry up, please. We've got a very busy evening. Thank you very much. Okay, if we can move to item 40, it gives me great pleasure to invite the Chief Constable, Francis Abgood, and the Area Commander, Sean Gertrude. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be back here again. First of all, start by saying that you probably already realise that Anthony Stansfeld is not here this evening. He sends his apologies, and unfortunately his deputy, Matt Garber, has got a council meeting that he couldn't get out. So I have said that I will cover some of his slides. I'm not going to do all of the slides because I want to go through the presentation reasonably quickly, so we've got time for questions and answers. So please don't tell him that I've cut out some of his slides. The secret could just be retrieved to us. But you will get all of the slides if you want to have a look at them, because there's a bit more detail in some of the slides that he's used. So, you know about the PC's responsibilities. I don't need to go through all of that. We've had PCCs, Police and Crime Commissioners, now for a number of years, but essentially they're on this first slide, and apologies, you're not going to get time to read all of these. And you also know about the size of Thames Valley and the growing size of Thames Valley. It's a significant area covering a number of different local authorities with significant numbers of visitors that are coming through us each day. The Police and Crime Commissioner sets a plan. He's just set his most recent strategic plan, which lasts from 2017 to 2021, and he's broken it down into these 5 key areas, focusing in on vulnerability. And it is, I should stress, it's a police and crime plan, so it's not just a plan for Thames Valley Police, but it's also about how we link into other partners as well, and he has some specific responsibilities around commissioning services. So it's about vulnerability, prevention and early intervention, reducing reoffending, how we're tackling serious and organised crime, and then also about the reform agenda and standards around police ethics. So those are all of the priorities. You can have a look at his plan. I've cut out the slides which give a bit more detail about the activities that are happening in each of the years. I've also cut out the slides that actually tell you about what's happened over the last quarter. Again, there's information in those slides if you want to have a look at that. I mentioned about the commissioning. One of the big changes that has happened in recent months is around commissioning services around Victims First. So it's providing support for victims and witnesses and making sure that there is support available, but a telephone service as well, and also advocacy and counselling. And he gets a budget on an annual basis, and as I say, he commissions services for a number of different providers. And there's now a really good website in place which provides information about how individuals can access a lot of these services. So just some of the headlines that he would talk about if he was here. You'll be aware of the publicity around the increases in crime. I'll talk a bit more later on about what's happened in Woking, which is probably what you're most interested in, but it's always useful to put it into the context of what's been happening nationally. So last year, Thames Valley, this is the financial year, Thames Valley saw an increase of crime of 8.7%. That was below the national average. Some of that is increases in areas of vulnerability, and again, I'll talk a bit about that later on. Last year, I remember talking about actually how we increase areas of vulnerability, and particularly that sort of hidden harm, and we've been doing a lot of work, and again, I'll talk about that in a bit. The other thing that's worth just pointing out on that slide is we continue to be inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, and it's also Fire and Rescue Services now, and we got some pretty good grades for that. Efficiency we were graded as outstanding, and effectiveness and legitimacy we were graded as good. This is what is happening to all crime. So although we have seen that increase in crime, the long-term trend has been down, and the numbers are still significantly lower than where they were going back into sort of the late 1990s, early 2000s. But that trend is upwards, not just in Thames Valley. As I say, it's across the whole of the country. And of course, it is at a time when our budgets, in the same way that you have seen, budgets have been restricted quite considerably. We've been through that period of austerity, and the lines on there show you what's on the right-hand side. That shows you what's happened in terms of formula funding, but also the real terms income. So we've effectively flatlined in terms of our actual money at a time when, of course, our demand's growing and we've had inflationary pressures. And I think everybody thought, actually, that reduction in crime would only last for so long, and at some point that plateau would start to go up. There are reasons for that, so I'll go into that around the specifics of Woking in a minute. In Thames Valley, these are some of the headline figures. Violence, we've seen an increase, and I will say a little bit more about the Woking figures, but violence went up 12.5% against the national average of 19%, and there's a bit of a common theme here. We are lower than the increases across the rest of the country. Sexual offences, a lot of this is still about making sure that people are reporting and we're recording those crimes. Quite a significant proportion of these, about 40%, are non-recent, over a year before the report was made that they were committed. And we have some crimes that were reported many decades before, but they get recorded in the year when they're reported.
So they can inflate, give an impression of inflating some of the crime figures in that respect. We are not, I don't think, seeing a massive increase or much of an increase in sexual offences that are current. A lot of this is about people's confidence to report. Burglary, nationally, we have seen an increase again in terms of residential burglary from all-time lows. There are a number of different trends that we're seeing. Some of it's around, for example, Asian gold, and I think you've experienced some of those in the past. And then also we have had a number of offenders travelling in from other parts of the country, in fact other parts of the world as well. And again, there's been a bit of publicity about some of that as well. Criminal damage and arson only increased by a relatively small amount. Drugs offences and weapons offences, you need to be a bit cautious about that because sometimes it's an indication of police activity rather than necessarily the levels of drug offending, drug use that is going on in a particular location. Because you actually only record a crime when we arrest somebody and deal with them. So just be cautious of that one. And then hate crime, again, it's an area where we know it's significantly underreported and we're trying to encourage reporting and recording to increase. But this is quite interesting because this shows what's happened in Thames Valley in comparison to our most similar family of forces. And you probably can't read it, but in our most similar family, there's Hampshire, Cambridge, Hertfordshire, Leicestershire, Sussex, Essex, Avon and Somerset. And what that shows you on the left is that our violence figures are the lowest in our most similar family. And on the right, it shows that in terms of our residential burglary figures, we're second lowest. Only Sussex has got lower than us. So although we've seen some increases, actually we are still low in comparison to our most similar family, and actually low nationally as well, which is good news. Anthony would want this one just to be shown. Again, the trend in knife crime, you'll have seen and heard of the initiative that's just been launched in London around the increases around violence and knife crime. We have seen increases. They are very low in comparison to some of the metropolitan areas that have been hitting the news. But we are seeing that, and there's a lot of work that we need to do, particularly with young people, about why they feel the need to carry a knife for their own protection and what the consequences of that could be. Some of the other trends we're seeing around knife crime are particularly around some of the county lines issues and the sort of gangs that are carrying knives. But then there is also an element of actually domestic related knife crime, and actually it's quite difficult to do a lot of that because actually in anger or frustration somebody will pick up a knife. But there are two areas we're really concentrating on, as I say, around young people in schools and working in schools, and also drugs and gangs. And it does link in with stop and search, and we're trying to make sure we encourage the use of stop and search, but it is much more targeted and intelligence-led. And fortunately, after a big decrease, we're just seeing some slight increases in the confidence of people to use that again. So that's all I wanted to cover from Anthony's presentation. The last year it's been pretty busy. I probably always say that, but actually I think the demand this year has been exceptional, not just in terms of the normal types of things that are coming into policing, but also because of things like this. We had one of the largest deployments of police officers and staff that we've ever had in Thames Valley in May when we had the Royal Wedding. It was a fantastic event to try and balance that very friendly and approachable and engaging way of talking to communities from all around the world, at the same time as the very serious issue of providing protection at a time when the threat level against from terrorism is at some of its highest levels. It was a great event, and I think it showed this country and policing off to the highest level. That was the biggest deployment until July, when we, I used my old joke where this event was trumped. Some of you got it. It wasn't very good. But we had President Trump, who visited 4 different locations across the Thames Valley area, and we had resources from across the country who supported us in that visit. Again, we had some people who were coming out to protest on that occasion, but also we had the very serious issue of providing that sort of protection. Again, a very successful deployment. But that's on top of Reading Festival, on top of Ascot, on top of Henley, lots of other events that were going on, and of course the demand that we're facing, both from some of the serious and complex crimes and incidents that we're facing, but also the general demand, which I'll talk about. Now, one of the things I get asked a lot about is our 101 call handling performance, and I suspect some of you will have been told about an experience by one of your residents who, when they phoned up the police and have been held on for quite some time trying to get through. When we are trying to encourage people to contact us if they have suspicious incidents, couldn't get through.
Thanks, Windows.
Right, I've got to be really quick. Right, so these are the call volumes. And you'll see the dark blue line is the 39s, the other sort of greeny colour are the 101s. This is the scale for the 39s, and that's the scale for the 101s. We get about 1 million 101 calls a year and about 300 39s a year. In July this year, we got 35,000 39 calls in a month, when normally we get 25,000. That's a significant increase. The 101s have been going down, but they've started to go up as well. There is possibly some bleed across where people are phoning the 39s rather than the 101s, but it's not just that. Of course, summer, July, it was hot. What we find is that people are generally less tolerant, actually. They're less tolerant of noisy neighbours. They can get more frustrated about certain driving behaviours. And actually, we had quite a lot on with some of the things that I've talked about. So the call volume went up significantly. And not surprisingly, this happened to our call handling figures. Again, this is the 39s. The dark blue, on average, we answer our 39 calls, we aim within 10 seconds, and we're pretty good at doing that. Even at the peak in July, it only went up to 12 seconds. Now, 12 seconds can seem quite a long time when you are dealing with an absolute emergency, but that's pretty good stats. But the 101s, whereas normally we have been averaging sort of 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, it went down to near where it should have been at the beginning of the year, down below 30 seconds, but it shot up again in July. I think that is a blip, again caused by that it being increasing the 39s, and we'll always prioritise the 39s, but also because of just the demand that was coming in, and also some staffing levels. We're doing an awful lot to address this. We've got some new technology coming. We've launched online. There are more people who are reporting things online. I would always encourage that for some people, where they're happy to report online and it is appropriate, but we're also addressing some of those staffing levels. So my message around this is, I know that there were problems in July. We are addressing that. The average is, at its worst time, it was about 6 minutes, but generally it's much, much better than that. So although there will be people at times who are hanging on for non-urgent calls, the vast majority are dealt with quickly, and those sorts of people don't complain. But it is an issue that we are addressing. So, in terms of local crime here, your violence has gone up. Actually, the violence over the last year has gone up by 30%, 35%. That sounds like an awful lot. I mean, it is a lot, but it's not because actually the borough has got more violent. It's actually partly because of some changes to crime recording standards, and I'll go on to talk about sort of crime data integrity issues. It's partly about domestic abuse, where you see some quite considerable increases, and it's also about, actually we are getting more reports from certain locations. We're finding we're getting more reports about young people, and whether it's in schools or parents reporting issues about young people. That doesn't mean that actually we're going to investigate and take them through the criminal justice system, because a lot of those cases it's not appropriate. It's entirely appropriate for the schools to deal with them, but we still have to record them under the rules. So that's into the violence. Robbery has gone up 12 offences. Most of this is linked into antisocial behaviour and what some people might call sort of taxing of young people. It's not sort of the higher level robberies that you would think of. Again, local issues to do with young people, a lot of them. Sex offences have gone up. This is all about what I've talked about already, that increased confidence and recording of sometimes issues that have happened a long time ago, but also better recording of domestic related sexual offences. And again, that's really important because we can manage the threat and we can manage the risk that is posed to people in those sorts of relationships. Arson and criminal damage has gone up. Again, this is pretty low level and linked mainly to antisocial behaviour. But the good news here, residential burglary has remained pretty static despite what's happening across the country. This is a safe place to live and work, and you know that, and it remains a safe place to live and work. And what's really good, actually, vehicle crime has gone down. That's against the trend in a lot of places where we're seeing some quite significant trends around theft of tools from vans. You haven't seen that. Your theft from persons from van, bike theft, shoplifting has all increased. So there's some good news in there, and where the increases have gone up. Personally, yes, we need to understand the figures, but it's not something that I think you should be overly worried about in terms of whether the streets are getting more violence and things like that. Crime data integrity, you'll have seen the headlines around this. Basically, this was about many of the things being reported. Some of them were going on as incidents rather than crime records, and some tightening up and changing to some of the rules. This was not about unethical recording where integrity was an issue, and we are addressing this, as in a lot of places. So just going on to some of the problem solving, last time I talked about sort of a strengthening of your problem solving working, and that has happened, and good links in with your community safety team and also with other partners. And one of the examples of that is around the working in Wooshill, which you'll be aware of, about antisocial behaviour and crime, mainly in the town centre, but extending out into Wooshill. This was identified. The neighbouring teams have been working really hard on not just sort of enforcement side, but also about that sort of engagement and reassurance, but also longer term problem solving. Mainly about young people, 14 to 18-year-olds, and a small core within that, 5 or 6 people. They've targeted that. A lot of those are awaiting prosecution. They've used tenancy banning orders. They've used prohibition orders. They've also done some target hardening, or the sort of partners have done target hardening, but then also working really closely with schools to send letters out, working with the secondary heads. And actually, I think the results have been really positive. So it's a good news story about actually working together in this sort of problem-solving way, breaks that cycle. Another one, quite simple one, bicycle thefts. Getting quite a lot of bicycle thefts at Asda, and we were finding that people were sometimes coming in on the train to steal bikes. Within 30 minutes of us putting up what's called a trap bike, basically it's a bike that's all rigged up. Within 30 minutes of placing it there, somebody tried to steal it, and of course was caught, and that's broken a lot of that offending. We've gone round to their house, recovered a number of bikes, some drugs, and also other stolen property. So really good, successful. And the person who initiated that, it was one of your PCSOs. You know, I just think that shows the value of that local geographic team. And I know there's been a lot of work around that recently. Demand reduction, safeguarding is really important. You've now got somebody who provides that link in to safeguarding issues. Some of it is potentially around cyber issues and the grooming of vulnerable, in this case it was vulnerable young girls. But really key that they have those links in with your adult and children's social care. The Stronghold team, hopefully you know about the Stronghold background, but basically that is a team who are able then to come in and support, whether it's in some of the antisocial behaviour issues, whether it's your burglary. You don't have a significant county line issue here. It is prevalent in other parts of the country. You don't have particular issues here, but it's always something we can never be complacent about. We just need to make sure we understand the big problems. And then vulnerable elderly people. This is basically a woman who was calling us and other organisations on a pretty consistent basis, but also attracting other people into her house to use it to somewhere to sort of drink, and then other neighbours were finding real difficulties with that. By actually sharing, pooling the information, working with the Mental Health Trust and other health organisations, we actually came up with an effective plan, and the problem has massively reduced the numbers of calls coming in. So again, really simple about how you share information, and then actually identify who's the most appropriate person or organisation to lead, and actually trying to break that cycle, and we need to do more of that. And then lastly, I talked about vulnerability. It's still important that we identify hidden harm. We know that there are still people who are not coming forward to report cases. So we're running a number of different high-profile campaigns. We've done modern slavery already. We've done online child abuse, which was in partnership with NSPCC. We've done the honour-based abuse over the summer, and hate crime is going to get launched next week. And all of these are done in partnership with you, because it's really important that our staff understand about when they come into contact with somebody who might be a victim, or whether it's modern slavery, is they identify the signs and who to contact. And I think that's been really successful. And after each of these, we've seen an increase in terms of those reports coming through, and an increase in the numbers of people who've been saved as a result of that. I'll pause at that point. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable. I've got some questions that have already been submitted. We'll get through these first, and if there's any other questions, if you'd like to show your hand. The first one is Pauline Yorgeson's question for the Chief Constable.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. It was interesting to see you highlighting the local policing group in Early. I'd just like to add my thanks to Julie Susel and Matt Foskett from that team, plus their PCSO. They've been really fantastic. They've been very supportive of the public over what was a long hot summer. And I'd just like to thank them very much and put that on record. So what I'd like to ask you about is traveller incursions. These involve the council and the police in a lot of expenditure, moving them on, dealing with criminal damage and clearing up. How many have we had in the area of Wokingham? How many of these have been cleared using Section 61 powers? What criteria do you use to decide whether you use Section 61 powers or not? What can you do to ensure incursions are robustly dealt with by the police? And what, if any, change in the law would you like to see?
5 in 1 on that one, I think, in terms of questions. So, I'll start by just saying that over the last year, what we have done is we've developed a protocol between all of the local authorities across the Thames Valley area, plus Thames Valley Police, which actually sets out what legislation is available to us, because I think there was probably sometimes a misunderstanding about what powers could be used, and when they could be used, and who is the most appropriate lead organisation. So that protocol has been signed by everybody. We're going to review that in November. There's a meeting already been diary. I think some of the learning that we can do, and it sort of answers one of your questions, is about the use of civil powers, civil injunctions. A number of parts of the country have explored the use of civil injunctions, whether it's the public space protection orders or whether it's a straightforward civil injunction. But you have to be really careful about that, because you can't use it as a blanket. It has to be specific. So I think there are some civil powers that local authorities are exploring. In terms of police powers, we have 2 police powers, Section 61, and you had 18 incursions, unauthorised encampments in 2018 so far, of which we've used Section 61 on 11 occasions. And those other occasions, either it's been on private land or it's been the council have used bailiffs. Section 61 has some uses, but you have to, it has to comply with the requirements around an impact on the society, on the community. We have other powers, Section 62, and that is where we can direct a traveller incursion to go to a particular transit site. Of course, there are no sites anywhere, transit sites anywhere in the Thames Valley area. So we can't use Section 62. These are temporary transit sites. Sorry? It has to be in the area of the local authority. We can't direct somebody to another local authority area. It has to be within your own area. That's the restrictions on the local authority. It has to be within your local authority area. In terms of the other changes, there's just been a consultation, so I think the first thing is to wait and see what comes out of the consultation. If the Police and Crime Commissioner was here, he would say, look at actually how Southern Ireland have dealt with it, and he has said that. The only thing I would say about that is effectively what they do in Southern Ireland is they make trespass a criminal offence. Now, that would just create a nightmare for us. You know, I'll be perfectly honest about that. In terms of the requirements that would place on us, it is onerous enough, and I think we just need to be really careful about potentially criminalising a whole section of a community. So there is a fine balance in terms of proportionality, justification, and dealing with what are a protected group. We have to work our way through the legislation that is available. I think we get that balance right. I think the protocol has helped, but there is no easy solution to this, because there are opposing views, I understand, on this.
Thank you. Rachel Shepherd-Today.
What are the effects of all the funding cuts to the police? Which services have been stretched to their limits? And what services have you had to eliminate or put on a skeleton staff?
I'll try and answer this briefly because I could probably stand here and talk to you for quite some time about that. So, the effects of the funding constraints placed on Thames Valley LP, just to put it into context, is my annual budget is just short of 400 million per annum. In real terms, it's gone down by 100 million pounds. So it's taken 20% off our budget in real terms. You can't take 100 million pounds out of an organisation and not say that it has had some effect. I would accept that the first part of that actually probably forced us to make some decisions, do some things that we probably should have done, and I think that's probably, if we're honest, true across all public sector, that actually there was a degree of looking at efficiency and effectiveness, making better use of technology, so we're delivering services in a different way, which is not always actually cutting. Our challenge, though, is that at the same time as dealing with that, we have all seen the requirements, the complexity of some of the issues we deal with go up. And I think around vulnerability is the most significant. So we prioritise dealing with the most vulnerable in our society, which I think is absolutely right, and you do exactly the same around adults and social care. But that has consequences elsewhere, and we have to prioritise. So I think the big difference is we are prioritising. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, every time a crime was reported, we tried to attend and speak to the victim. Whether they wanted to or not, we were trying to go and see them. We don't do that now. I'm not sure that that makes a massive difference in terms of the potential to investigate those cases, because we can do that assessment over the telephone and we will contact them over the telephone, but we won't go see them. So it's a different service, but we've had to do things differently in that respect. But there are many other ways behind the scenes, so in our back office functions where we have taken out some of those maybe discretionary, we've had to cut back. But what we have tried to do is protect the front line. And this year was the first year we had taken any resources out of our local police areas through the whole period of austerity. And that was only 70 police officers across the whole of the Thames Valley area. I didn't want to do that, but it had got to that stage. So hopefully that gives you sort of a picture of what we've done.
Thank you. Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable and Superintendent Virtue, for coming to talk to us. Your force might be as many as 100 officers short of where you would like to be. The government has recently cut the proposed salary increase for police officers from 3% to 2%, which in my view is a pretty huge mistake. Do you think that this decision by the government will make it harder for your force to reduce the shortfall of officers, and will it become harder to retain the experienced officers that our local communities rely on?
So we're actually now more than 100 officers below our establishment. We are managing to recruit significantly, and so we've got no problems bringing people in. But in terms of some of the officers who, we're losing some officers who are getting to the end of their service, so that's natural, but we're also finding that this year and last year, there are more people who are going to other parts of the country. Now, we were recruiting quite significantly over the last 5 years when other parts of the country weren't, and actually now that the other parts of the country are recruiting, some of them are deciding actually they want to return to where their roots were. We've lost quite a few to, say, Devon and Cornwall. Personally, and I've talked to them, I don't think any amount of money would necessarily, or it would have to be so much to stop some of those decisions. Because they're actually going back to family, it's a quality of life decision. So I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think the 3% that the pay review body recommended, but the government said just to do the 2%, would have made that much difference in financial terms. I think there is there is a message about a pay review body, an independent pay review body recommendation for the second year not being honoured. And I think there is something as well about the message, and I think this is fair, that officers felt as to whether they were supported because that didn't happen. But I don't think it's as simple as is it 2% or 3%. There are lots of other factors at play here. We are doing an awful lot to be an employer of choice, to retain our staff, but sometimes there are just things that are outside of our control. We train our officers pretty well. We have some fantastic people. They are very attractive to other forces.
Lindsay Ferris.
Good evening, Chief Constable. Before I ask my question, you mentioned the 101 service. I used that earlier this year on a Sunday evening, ironically, to report an incursion by travellers, and after nearly 15 minutes I gave up. There was no reply. Are you still able to meet the demand for police services, bearing in mind the reduced level of detection rates that are now occurring in Thames Valley Police and across the country as a whole?
So just to comment about the detection rates first. Having said that in certain areas crime is going up, so the violence, for example, crime is going up, but I made the point earlier on that some of that violence is because it is very low level, and actually we would not expect to see those cases going through the criminal justice system. We had a really bad period in policing history where there was a massive drive for detection rates, and we found that a lot of people were entering the criminal justice system because of a target, and actually that was not appropriate. So sometimes you can get a positive outcome, even though you haven't got a detection, but actually you have protected the victim and you have made potentially some other sort of disposal for dealing with the offender. So just be cautious about detection rates. They are important in certain areas. You know, for murders, you would expect us to solve all murders, and for those serious crimes. But in terms of the demand on services, you know, I said earlier on that the stretch is getting quite considerable, and the complexity and seriousness of some cases means that actually they require more time. We're doing an increasing amount of work on protecting the most vulnerable, dealing with county lines. It might be one drugs offence, but actually what sits behind it is an awful lot of vulnerability issues. So I would say we have to be smarter in the way that we target, but I don't want to just be responding. I want to break some of the cycle of that crime as well, of antisocial behaviour. So the work, the examples I gave you earlier on, is absolutely critical. But there is no doubt we are having to prioritise, and we're having to make some decisions that sometimes feel uncomfortable about what we can and can't do. Actually, you could I think when we explain it to members of the public about what we can and can't do if there are no lines of inquiry, then most people will understand and recognise that, but it's still really important that we get those reports and we understand the full picture of demand, because that helps us in terms of that prioritisation and also building the picture to break some of that cycle. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm amazed about what we do. When I go around the force and talk to officers about and officers and staff about what they're doing, when I see the results, I'm really proud about what they're delivering on a daily basis. And I think also about their desire to do more, and frustration sometimes that they can't do more, because I think that's really healthy, that they want to provide the best quality service. But it is about prioritising and concentrating on the most vulnerable in our society.
Thank you very much. Members, we are now out of time, so no more questions accepted. Thank you very much, Chief Constable and Superintendent. Sean, it's unlikely we're going to need your services in here tonight, so I can't promise. So if you'd like to Okay, the next one, number 41, Highways and Transportation Term Service Contract Renewal. Thank you very much. Thank you. There are some confidential papers with this, but I believe nobody wishes to ask any questions related to the pink papers, and as such means that I don't have to clear the chamber, which is quite nice because it puts another 10 minutes. Takes another 10 minutes of our time. So who is going to propose this? Anthony Pollock?
Thank you, John. Mr. Mayor.
Do you have a secretary, Anthony?
I think John was going to second before me. So, anyway, Highways transportation or a term service contract renewal. It's a bit deja vu. I was involved in a couple of these previously in a previous life when I was involved with highways. So it's been one of those services. We inherited a contract from Bounty, I think, as Pauline Palisani will remember, when we went unitary about 25 years ago. And every time we've come up for renewal, we've learned things from the previous time, and we've incorporated it, and we've lent a new contract, and this occasion is no different. There are some really interesting new service issues that will come through in this contract, particularly around the IT side of things. And after we've mobilised over the next 6 months, I'm planning to do some I think, quite detailed training for members, because I think some really exciting opportunities for both us and for our communities, self-service, understanding what's going on in our communities, monitoring what's happening. And I think on the basis that the IT works as we expect, and on the basis I think that we all really do understand it, I think we shall have a fabulous time using it. And I think it will also enable us to provide better quality services to our residents, which is one of the reasons why we're all here in the first place. One of the couple of sort of other aspects, in the last couple of contracts renewals, we've taken, we've externalised a number of professional white-collar functions, usually because we can't get the staff, we can't recruit them in the first place, either because the team itself isn't quite big enough, or because the contractor is able to offer better terms and conditions, better training, better prospects to people. And so we've had a number of white-collar members of the team who actually work currently for WSP, who are embedded with our own highways people on a day-to-day basis. Decisions being made as part of this contract to bring that group back in-house. And I think it's quite exciting that we will have effectively one team on the day-to-day side of the operations. As we have had on previous occasions, specialist services we don't have the workload to justify one person doing it, or they employ the person to do that, or a team to do that, and therefore buying those services in from a professional services business who can sell those services to a wider number of local authorities makes a lot of sense. And we have two different levels of price. There's a level of price if they come here and do it, and there's a slightly better level of price if they sit in their office and do it. So I think we've been able to consider the importance around the finances. The other piece on the white-collar contract is that we have had conversations with some of our neighbours, and we have a feature in the contract whereby they can buy services through this contract, through this framework contract. And if they do, we make a bit of a turn, which is rather nice, helps our finances, etc. So I think on balance, the professional services contract has actually been a really good opportunity. It's been good, and the way it works and the way it's been structured is very good. As far as what I call the blue-collar contract, we folded in a couple of other contracts with it, and we have, instead of having a contractor who doesn't have any other contracts in this area, we have a contractor who has a number of other contracts in the area, and we are looking for that to enable us to have a more, what's the phrase I'm looking for, a more sustainable level of service, because if we have a particular demand, and maybe a neighbouring authority who has less demand, and we can pull resources from them to get it done in good time. And I think that should mean that our service is in a more sounder basis. So I think that's a good thing. The risk is, of course, that when they have needs, we have to help them out, and that could have some problems. But on balance, the savings that we're making on some of the costings will enable us to do more with the money that we spend. And so I'm really looking forward to, over the next few years, to be able to resurface more roads and to fill more potholes, to the pleasure of members as they seek to ensure that they are done, and residents who come to us and say, why isn't this pothole filled? So I think both with the IT and with the finances, We've got a really good contract here. Particularly want to mention Alex Deans, who I think has worked really, really well on this contract over the last couple of years, and I know he's made a presentation to other groups as well as the Conservative group, and I would like to place thanks, particularly to Josie, if you could pass that on from us here as councillors, and thank you very much for the sterling job that he's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Charlotte Hayton-Taylor, would you like to reserve, or would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to be able to second this contract this evening. As I said earlier on this evening, this contract offers good value for money and also strong performance management. I think the residents will be really thrilled to hear that potentially they'll be getting their potholes filled. I'd also like to echo Councillor Pollock's thanks to officers for the hard work over this long period of time, over years piece of work putting this contract together. They spent a lot of time engaging residents and members to get cross-party, hopefully cross-party support for this piece of work and these contracts. It has gone through over scrutiny a number of times and there's been a lot of cross-party engagement. The contract really is new and innovative, and also the IT as well. And I hope that residents will really start to see the benefits of this very quickly, and also members too, and it should be much more easily accessible for them to report things. And also see what's going on in terms of highways in the event. As per the executive meeting earlier on this evening, I'd like to draw members' attention to page 47, which gives clear guidance about the OG procurement legislation, which just reminds members that it is confidential up until Wednesday, 3rd of October, and it's just a reminder, please, not to talk about the contents of this until then. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Who else would like to speak? Lindsay Ferris.
Thank you. I was very pleased at the level of involvement in this contract. I was involved in a number of working groups, and we had a presentation and a full question and answer session to the group in the last few weeks. So I was very pleased to be able to add and ask questions on that. So I can confirm that the Liberal Democrat group is satisfied that all proper procedures were put in place during the tendering process and that we support the award of these contracts. Of course, there are still some issues to resolve, especially relating to getting the successful tenderers up and running on the 1st of April, how the contracts actually perform, and also the future use of Tatley Road site, but that is for another day. And my final comment is, happy birthday, Charlotte.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this one? No? Okay. Back to you, Anthony. You're right to reply.
Not much. Anyway, I commend this contract to council as I believe it will benefit our residents.
Okay, members, can we vote on this, please? All in favour? Carried. Okay, 43. Treasury Management Outturn to be proposed by Charlotte Haytham-Taylor, to be seconded by Anthony Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report, starting on page 107, sets out the Council's Treasury Management actions through 2017 to 2018. And it's worth noting, as set out on page 116, that the Council complied with all of its prudential indicators, acting within the limits set out in the Borrowing Treasury Management Strategy. It's also worth pointing out that our investments have continued to perform well despite the national economic picture being uncertain. I therefore would like to recommend to the Council the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2017-18, and also recommendation 2, the actual 2017-18 prudential indicators within the report.
Thank you. Anthony, would you like to speak now?
I think I might as well. Thank you very much. As I have often said to members in the past, this is a really riveting read. and I do commend it for work. Seriously, there's a lot in here. I particularly like to draw attention to Table 9 on page 118. We lent a considerable amount of money to other local authorities. The rate of interest isn't wonderful. It is slightly better actually than the money markets and fund managers. But internally, when we lend to ourselves to work on a number of things that we're involved in, we get a far better return on our money. So again, using our own money to fund our own funds and to return better income to the taxpayer of our borough. As you can see in pages 125 through to 27, 29, you can see where the investments are, significant numbers of amounts of money that we have invested, public sector works loan boards and HRA self-financing. I suspect that the HRA money is the balance of the money that we have to pay the government to buy back our the income on our housing stock. It's a peculiar aspect of you have to pay money to buy something you already own, but that's central government for you. And you can see the maturity structures on page 127. So again, we don't have significant pressures on our maturing loans in the short term. The rest of the bits and pieces linked through to the capital programme, which as many people know is particularly ambitious, particularly with all of our SDLs, and we need to build everything from roads to community centres to secondary schools, primary schools. I get quite staggered that a secondary school costs 40 million to build, but it does. And that roads are costing us 20 to 30 million to build, but they do. So we are needing to invest in our communities, we're needing to invest for our residents, and the road aspect I'm very pleased to wear my transport hat because it does have an impact on helping to reduce congestion. So with the various prudential indicators, as Charles has said, we have complied as we always do. So I would commend this Treasury Management Report to Council.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions? Andy Ferry.
Thank you. Whilst it is technically correct that the Council has kept within the approved limits and prudential indicators for 2017 and 18, this is only because the Council has itself increased the authorised limit to accommodate the figures in question. The Council is now behaving like someone who has a number of credit cards and spends up to the limit on each of these cards. This limit is then increased again and again for each credit card so that the level of authorised spending or debt keeps increasing year on year. This is unsustainable and will surely end in tears. Already, we can see this level of forecast debt increasing from the current 273 million last financial year to 450 million this financial year to near 600 million next financial year. At the same time, the cost of financing the revenue streams is projected to increase from a current figure of circa 3% to over 5.5% by the end of next year. This means there will be increasing pressure on the Council to provide its basic services such as waste collection, highways and the like. At some point, we feel this pressure will become too large for the Council to deliver these services and others. Also, at the moment, we have no executive or deputy exec member for finance, as both these members resigned these past weeks. So who is in charge of our finances? This would make the fourth financial exec member in the last 18 months. The Liberal Democrats are extremely concerned about these levels of debts and the ability of the Council to meet its obligations in the future. On this basis, I wrote to the Secretary of State for Local Government last week to formally advise him of our concerns about how the Council is being currently managed with its increasing levels of borrowing and without a clear direction to deal with these problems. As a result, we shall be voting against these financial figures because we are extremely worried about the direction this Conservative nation is taking us. I am also calling for a recorded vote.
I take it that there is no more questions.
What's the question?
Okay, is your right to reply, Carmen?
Thank you, Councillor Ferris. I'm disappointed by your response this evening. I'm not sure that you've understood some of the reasons why we've borrowed the money. Some of it is forward funding for some of the large projects that are going on around the borough at the moment, particularly forward funding for Section 106 payments, which will be coming into the coffers later on to fund some of the projects which our residents are already enjoying, and funding for some of the roads, the schools, and leisure centres. And many of these projects will be paid off within the next 10 years. I know that you didn't support the investment strategy, which is about investing in local properties, which also is about to bring in a revenue stream to go into the bottom line, to invest in some of the services to support some of our most vulnerable in our community. It is disappointing that your members won't be supporting this paper this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, Lindsay's asked for a named vote, so if we can start that. Can you read it?
Councillor Alty?
For.
Councillor Baker?
For.
Councillor Blomell? For. Councillor Barry?
For.
Councillor Bray? Against. Councillor Burgess? Against. Councillor Cheng? For. Councillor Cowan?
Against.
Councillor Croy?
Against.
Councillor Delinsky?
For.
Councillor Durand?
Against.
Councillor Ferris?
Against.
Councillor Grandison?
For.
Councillor Hayton-Taylor? For. Councillor Halsall? Councillor Hare?
Against.
Councillor Elliott-Sands? For. Councillor Hobbs? Councillor Hodgson?
For.
Councillor Howe?
For.
Councillor Jones?
Against.
Councillor Normanson? Sorry, Normanson? Pauline Normanson?
For.
Councillor Kaiser? Councillor King? Councillor Noyes?
For.
Councillor Marget?
For.
Councillor Mayo?
For.
Councillor Murphy?
For.
Councillor Munro?
For.
Councillor Patman?
For.
Councillor Pitter?
Against.
Councillor Bullock?
For.
Councillor Powell?
Against.
Councillor Richards?
For.
Councillor Ross?
For.
Councillor Imogen? Imogen?
Against.
And Michelle?
Against.
Councillor Slade?
Me for.
Councillor Smith? Councillor Smith?
Which one?
Oh, Chris Smith, sorry, 2 yes. Chris Smith. Councillor Waitson?
For.
Councillor Soap?
Abstain.
And Councillor Eunice?
For.
Thank you very much. The vote is carried. Thank you very much. We can move on to section 44 in the agenda, which is the appointment of the Statutory Director of Children's Service. We will be proposing that. Pauline, the assignment. Do you have a second to Pauline? Okay. Lindsay Ferris, thank you. Pauline.
Thank you. As one of the people that interviewed Carol Harris,
I'm delighted to propose that we accept the recommendation of the Personnel Board and appoint her as the new Director of Children's Services. This is an incredibly important role, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about Carol Camis. She combines a high degree of technical and operational knowledge with strong management experience. She started her career in education, then 20 years ago qualified as a social worker, since when she has climbed up through the ranks at all levels. But in addition, her work has included jobs in corporate services, budgeting, quality assurance, performance, and she's led on culture change. This spectrum of experience is therefore very wide and is mixed and valuable, ranging from performance management, budget management, and leadership of people, right through to child safeguarding. An additional bonus is that Carol is an internal promotion, having been here at Woking Borough for 5 months, so she's able to slot into the job almost at once. A permanent Children's Services Director is urgently needed after a rather unstable period. But she has the added advantage that as well as knowing us, she also brings fresh eyes and a fresh approach, not being ensconced in the existing culture. And so she brings ideas on how to do things differently. She's also a professionally qualified coach and will use this to the benefit of her staff. She's also highly intelligent, having gained her MA while holding down a job of work, the topic being working with very complex children. I highly recommend her and have pleasure in proposing that we appoint Carol Camis as Permanent Statutory Director of Children's Services on a date soon to be agreed.
Thank you, Pauline. Lindsay, would you like to make your comment here?
Yes, I'll be very short. I am very happy to second the appointment of Carol Camis to the post of Director of Children's Services. I was also on the Personnel Board and was very impressed with her. We wish her well in her role and look forward to working with her.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the matter? If not, we'll go to Stuart.
Yes, briefly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that I chaired that Personnel Board and we had some very strong candidates. And it's just nice to see that an internal candidate come through that process. We all wish her very well. Thank you.
Pauline, if you're right to reply, you want to say anything there?
I'd just like also to reiterate what my colleagues have said and congratulate Carol Camis and say that we very much look forward to working for her, and then formally to propose the motion as on the paper.
Thank you very much. Members, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, on to number 45, review of polling districts and polling places. Pauline, you are proposing this. Do you have a seconder? Lindsay Ferris. Thank you, Lindsay. Pauline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, the Council has a duty to review the polling districts and polling places for all areas within Woking Borough in accordance with the Representation of People Act. It's very important that we make sure that all the polling stations are in the right place and that we can maximise the vote from all the residents. So this review will be cross-party and will look for recommendations for any changes to polling stations and will report in due course. I'd like to propose it.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Would you like to speak?
I'll speak. We're happy to support and second. I just want a clarification because it's in the title of the document, but in Pauline's words she only referred to polling stations. So for clarification, what is the review actually covering? Does it cover polling station placements, or are they proposing to make changes to ward boundaries? Because it's not clear from the title, but in the text it suggests only polling. If it's polling, we're more than polling stations, we're really happy on that. So happy to support, but with that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This review of polling stations does not cover ward boundaries. That's a matter for the local government boundary commission for England, and that is something for the future.
It's just the title of the agenda item, the 45, says review of polling districts and
It's a
polling
bit misleading,
places.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
Clarification.
For that reason?
Yes.
Okay, Pauline, did you just want to say anything else?
No.
Okay. Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support this. However, I would ask that when this review is carried out, that for the changes in Maiden Early, the Red Hatch and Maiden Early awards were traditionally held in the Maiden Early Library, which is no longer in residence. So can I encourage that when reviewing that we look at other alternatives, but also can we ensure that it tries to remain on that Maiden Early site area, whether it's Silverdale Centre or maybe the primary school attached as well, just for other alternatives. Thank you.
Would you like to reply to that, Pauline?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would encourage all members that have opinions on polling stations to feed into the review, and we'll make sure we take all those comments into account. Thank you, Gav.
Thank you very much. Let's go straight to the votes, members. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Carried. Thank you. Okay, nice. Number 46, statement of licensing policy. Who's proposing that? Harry Patten. Do you have a seconder? Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak, Barry?
Thank you, Chairman. There's a requirement to review our licensing policy at least every 5 years. We've taken the opportunity to expand the scope of our policy and to increase the explanations regarding the policy objectives. For those of you that don't recall those, these are essentially preventing of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, protection of children from harm. And there are a number of paragraphs in the document which explain in detail how that is being dealt with. There's also a change to the guidance for larger events that will allow local members to be kept informed of activities. That's all I think I really want to remind councillors of at this moment, and that they can read the rest of it at their leisure. Chairman, Mayor, I recommend this policy for adoption by the council.
Thank you, Barry. Malcolm, would you like to speak now?
I don't think I need to add anything to that. There were several meetings about licensing. We discussed a number of areas, and I'm happy to second it as it is.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No questions. We can go straight to the vote, members. Those in favour? Unanimous. Okay, we can move to number 47, which is a statement on gambling principles. Again, Barry, I believe that you're proposing this, and your seconder, Malcolm. Okay. Your turn, Barry. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. I don't intend to say very much on this because we're lucky in working in with regards to the amount of gambling that gets dealt with. This is a very straightforward statement of gambling principles. We're lucky in working in that we have very few premises that require a licence, and I would ask Council to approve the statement, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Malcolm, did you wish to speak?
I have nothing to add to that other than to second it.
Any questions? Okay, again, we can go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Again, unanimous, maybe it's having the chief Number 48, statement by the leader, the executive member and deputy. No more than 5 minutes long. Charlotte?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And may I start by congratulating you on your launch of your Mayor's Awards this evening, and in particular the first 2 recipients. Very worthy indeed. I'd also like to thank the petitioners this evening, and they really are far-reaching issues that they brought to us this evening, and perhaps they need taking up with central government too. Before I go into the main topic of my speech tonight, I have great pleasure in announcing that I've appointed Councillor Pauline Jorgensen as my deputy leader of the council. Councillor Jorgensen has a wealth of experience as an executive member and also one of the directors of the holding companies too. And I'm very pleased to have her sat by my side, and I'm quite certain that she will keep me on the straight and narrow. And also, just to say that, you know, Pauline's got great experience, not just in the council, but also outside, also in IT, HR and change management in a huge company, many of you might know. Shouldn't really be advertising, obviously, but BA. Also, it would be very remiss not to mention Josie this evening, who it is Josie's last full council meeting here. Josie's obviously not going very far, we've heard Slough, so I'm sure we'll be crossing paths in other meetings, not in the too distant future. But I just want to say a huge thank you for everything that you've done in all of the time that you've been here. You've been a truly dedicated officer and you'll be sorely missed. And I just want to say a huge good luck to you. And I hope that you enjoy your new role. You really deserve it. And you know, Chief Exec is a fantastic reward for all of your hard work that you've put in here. So congratulations. And I hope that all of you will join me in congratulating you. At the last council meeting, I spoke about our work on producing a new council plan, and over the course of this month, we've held engagement sessions with the public, seeking their views on our vision and our priorities. So far, we've held 3 separate sessions at Dindon Pastures, Woodley, and at Twyford. Tomorrow, we'll be out in Woking, and on Saturday in Lower Early. Details of the consultation are also available on the website, and I'd really urge members to take out flyers and copies of the council plan and engagement document when you speak to your residents on the doorsteps. I'd really like to say a huge thank you to all of the officers who've given up so much of their time going out for these pop-up days. They've volunteered much of their time, at weekends in particular, to go and talk to residents. And I'd encourage anybody who's got the time over tomorrow and particularly on Saturday to also go and join the officers in doing that. There's been a lot of speculation, I know, in the press recently over the last few weeks about my leadership. And so I thought it was a good time really to stand here and talk about the decisions, what it's like being a leader, and how difficult it is sometimes to be seeing what it's like to be on the side of what is right and fair, even when those are bereft of the courage and will buckle under the first sight of difficulty. Presiding in judgment over those who choose to stand up and be counted when you stick your neck out sometimes requires some bravery. And it has been quite difficult over the last few weeks, obviously. We would not deserve to be leaders if I, or my executive, or my Conservative group were too afraid to do the right things, even when it's the unpopular things to do. Under my leadership, we've had the courage to challenge the government over the unsuitable housing numbers, and we continue to do this. We faced down ministers over negative RSG, that's negative revenue support grant. It's really the penalty that our residents are facing for voting for sound financial management. We've kept up the pressure on the Secretary of State, ministers and the Prime Minister over funding for children's and adult social care too. We've chosen to invest the largest sum of money ever in our communities over the next 3 years. We've pressed on with reshaping the council into an organisation that's fit for a digital age. We've set up an investment strategy too, so people in Woking Borough should never have to face the savage cuts thrust upon people, such as those of the residents of Reading. We fought to keep up the fundamentals that truly matter to people, making sometimes hard decisions on some, but other things that we've gotten used to that other councils aren't doing. In our council plan, we've embarked on the most ambitious programme ever to redefine the relationship between the citizens and the local government, giving a voice to communities in a way that's never been done before. We need to take our residents on a journey of being part of one community. Along the way, we must get on with the job of building a sustainable council with services for a changing population and entering into a new spirit of being enterprising and entrepreneurial. The path may be strewn with obstacles, and the destination may not always be clearly in sight, whether it's the town centre regeneration or our work to get in place the plan for sustainable housing in the future. Sometimes, amongst the pain, it can be hard to see the fruits of what we're striving for. We may not always get everything right along the way. We must seek to shake off the naysayers with the poverty of ambition, as well as the false prophets, the siren voices who push us towards a new Eden, straight over the edge into a pit.
We are at 5 minutes. I'm prepared to allow you to continue, but it will eat into the time of the other executives.
I'll be very quick. We must never be too timid to think big. If we don't dare to be bold, we never fear failure, nor ever know the triumph of success. I believe that we have a vision worth fighting for, and while I'm leader of this council, I'll continue to battle every single day to deliver it for the most important city of all, and that's the residents of Wokingham Borough.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an incredibly exciting time to be standing here talking to you as the Executive Member for Regeneration. Our vision for Wokingham Town Centre as a vibrant market town that stands out from our larger neighbours is very much coming to the forefront as works begin to reveal themselves across the town. The new marketplace is now complete and residents can start to get a real feel for what we're trying to create and why regeneration is so important for Wokingham. With a far improved layout, lots of room for entertainment and plentiful seating to simply relax and enjoy the town centre, this new space is really coming into its own now. And as could be seen last Saturday, it's become a place that's perfect as a venue for events and bigger and better markets. Peach Place moves forward in leaps and bounds with scaffolding coming down to reveal the new units, the footpath in Peach Street now being resurfaced, shop fronts going in, and the first of our new tenants chomping at the bit to get ready to provide access ready for trade for Christmas. Over the next few weeks we will start to release the names of the new businesses coming to Wokingham, and from the comments we've received about the types of operators they would like to see in the town centre, I'm confident that local residents will be pleased with what they hear. We've always been clear that we want a strong local independent offer within Peach Place, along with some great quality national names and niche businesses. And this is exactly what we are doing and have achieved. Elmsfield continues apace with the steelwork all ready to take shape for the new hotel, Aldi, the cinema and other retail units. No one will deny that the face of the High Street is changing, but Wokingham continues to remain strong and to book the national trends, with businesses continuing to remain interested in units in this town. And I, for one, am proud to belong to a council who are investing in their community and for their community.
Thank you, Philip. Richard Galinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm privileged to be invited to attend adult social care team meetings, and at those team meetings I learn a lot more about the challenges, also the outcomes, very positive outcomes of our work that we do. On the challenges, I just want to say thank you to the Liberals who are come to join us in a cross-party working group on facing some of those very difficult challenges. So thank you for coming forward. On the outcomes, I just want to give you just one outcome this evening, and that is a resident. GD is a 78-year-old resident who lives with his wife. GD has a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, resulting in reduced mobility. He's become totally dependent on his wife for support despite the physical strain it's put upon her. On receiving a referral, it was critical for our occupational therapists to build a good rapport as quickly as possible to develop trust with GD and his wife. Throughout the course of 7 home visits, the OT team focused on solutions. They taught Mrs. GD to avoid using verbal cueing and instructing, as those with Parkinson's disease struggle to multitask, and this increases freezing episodes. The OTs worked on developing confidence and used a strength-based approach and modification of techniques, which has resulted in GD regaining his confidence to walk again. Specialist equipment has been provided to help improve his mobility and his independence. In addition, a carer's budget was agreed for Mrs. GD, which now allows her to use a taxi at least a couple of times a month, so she can go shopping and without having to struggle. More importantly, it's given her some time to herself. There's a lot more I could say about the work delivered by our officers. extraordinary work that our officers deliver in meeting the targets and also the positive outcomes for some of our most vulnerable residents. However, I'm going to leave the last words to Mrs. GD. Occupational therapy has given me my husband back.
Thank you, Richard. Pauline? Sorry, it's Simon. Sorry.
Did just wonder. Thank you. First, I'd like to pay tribute to all of the staff who turned out for our activity event for our children in care at the end of August. Some of them actually gave up their day off to come. It was a great day, enjoyed by everybody, and certainly everybody that I spoke to, which was most of the people there. And it took place at the Oakwood Outdoor Activity and Climbing Centre in my ward. Secondly, I'd like to report that yet again our students have gained excellent GCSE and A-level results, in A-levels exceeding the national average once again. All 4 of our children in care from year 13 who applied to university have secured a place. That's 30% of the year 13 children in care of that cohort are going to university. They'll be studying mathematics, English, art and education, and I'm incredibly, very, very proud of all of them. It's a huge success for them to gain these places. There's been a big increase in the work of the department over the last year. In particular, there's been a 32% increase of children in care since the 2017 data, and a significant increase last October and November. There's been a big increase of referrals coming to our social services staff since last September, with up to 900 a month needing investigation. The number of cases our social workers are dealing with has doubled in the last year. There are a number of reasons for these increases, such as an Act of Parliament in 2017, which made us responsible for children in care up to the age of 25, so there have been fewer children leaving care. 1,000 new houses in the borough each year, with their families of course. Double the number of unaccompanied asylum seekers, and a greater awareness by partners, schools and police, for example, as we heard earlier on, of what to look out for and to report. All of this, of course, is putting huge pressures on the Children's Services budget. But we've seen many success stories. We've worked ever closer with the NHS and the police. Permanent exclusions from the schools have fallen, and this includes a decrease in their use by special schools. Overall absence rates remain low, which has helped our exam results, of course. There's been joint working between the local authority and senior school leaders on behaviour management strategies. Fewer looked after children are placed more than 20 miles from their homes. The Ministry of Justice has match funded us after the approval of our Youth Justice Plan, which includes the use of restorative justice and making young people aware of the impact of their own offending behaviour. Bovis Homes has transferred us the land for the building of the new Matthews Green Primary School, which received planning permission last February. And Wokingham Borough has sufficient entitlement for 2-, 3- and 4-year-olds, including the extended free 30-hour entitlement. Childcare provision has 95% of providers judged good or outstanding at Ofsted. These statistics are higher than the national norm and are very good news indeed. Unsurprisingly, therefore, parental satisfaction is high and parents feel they have access to appropriate, high-quality provision for their children. At the next council meeting in November, there will be a re-signing of the Children in Care pledge that we make as corporate parents with our children in care. This will be signed by the Mayor and by members of the Children in Care Council. Finally, I'd like formally to welcome our interim DCS and thank him for the excellent work that he's been doing to move on the work of our department, for the way he's involving officers and giving them ownership of their work, and in particular the work he's doing in preparing us for a potentially imminent Ofsted inspection. Thank you very much, Jim. It's good to have you with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
We can move on to the next section, which is a statement from Council and Pauline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose an extension to the meeting for another half an hour, as I feel we're not going to get through the material business.
We can't stay until after 10.
Okay, sorry, I'll do it later.
Thank you for the heads up, Pauline.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Statement from members of the council-owned companies. Alistair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it nice and brief, given the amount of business we've got to come. Just to add, from a WHL perspective, in the last financial year, we delivered 1/4 of all the affordable homes that were completed in the borough, which is 123. And this contribution is testament to the hard-working team across all of our housing companies led by Bill Flood. While I'm sure all would agree that this delivery of affordable homes is most welcome, the challenge is to continue to deliver more year in and year out. Developing on council-owned land remains our priority, though I would like to see this move at a greater pace. The regeneration of Gorse Ride Estate will provide an additional number of homes, in addition to the existing ones there, and as well as they will be of a higher standard. That's an exciting project that we're enjoying being an integral part of. Finally, as part of our evolution, we are evaluating non-Wokingham Borough Council owned land opportunities so we can continue to deliver more high quality, affordable housing that our borough residents both need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, in connection with Optimus, some headlines. Customer satisfaction is at 87%, which is ahead of the strategic objectives of 80%. The company has been awarded Disability Confident Employer status by the Department of Work and Pensions. On the quality front, every inspection we've had in the last 6 months have been good, where there were previously requires improvement, which is 100% success rate. Financially, we're performing ahead of budget year to date, and we have won a new contract in Reading, or Reading College, delivering supported employment services. In the previous contract we had there, I think we are one of the few operators of this service to the learning disability community, where we have almost 100% success rate of getting them into employment. So that is really important for them and really important for us. And on the people front, staff turnover is below the national average, absenteeism and vacancies are below the national average. So all in all, I believe Optus is delivering for us, for Woking Borough, for our residents, and I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Darren?
Thank you. London Homes first shared ownership homes at Elizabeth Road, 2 units, and Barrack Crescent, also 2 units, are very close to being sold. We expect sales income to be £115,000 more than estimated, which is welcome additional income to the company. London continues to focus on ensuring Woking Borough Council Housing Services fill all of the vacancies quickly, but there remain some vacancies at Foster's due to the need to identify residents who have both a care and a housing need. At London's September board meeting, this issue and loss of income was discussed. Consequently, the board has asked the Borough Council to formally relax the criteria of housing applicants. Thanks to the many years of cajoling from David Chopping to set up housing companies to deliver much needed housing to our residents, we have had several years of hard work culminating in our registration as a for-profits registered housing provider. This achievement was a very first for a council. And for a council, this is a truly amazing success story. And my thanks must go to the professional staff along with Councillors Alice Doughty and David Chopping. for the superb efforts of getting us to where we are today. From small beginnings, we've moved up the gear and are now on the cusp of the most exciting times in our evolution. And that is delivered to all our residents even much more affordable housing. The addition of the Prime Minister's recent announcements to provide £2 billion to housing companies and councils will help kickstart Rodden Homes to bigger and better things. Sadly, I will not be leading that charge, as I've offered my resignation to the Rodden Homes Board as the chairman. My reason is very simple. To continue, I need the assurance and comfort of the standard contract which other non-executive directors have, plus the support of this administration. Sadly, the reasons only the Conservative administration can answer, they saw fit not to renew my normal contract, but to put me on a month-to-month contract with no discussion or debate. It seems to have nothing to do with competence or ability to do one's job, so I leave it to others to guess the reason why. The lack of continuity has been created, and by it, the constraint placed on my independence as the chairman of Rodden Homes is insidious and has seriously hampers my ability to freely and independently function in the best interests of the company, the council, and most importantly, our residents. Such arrangements for me, when there are other non-executive directors on longer contracts, was not lost on me. It's a heavy heart that I take this decision, and unlike others, I will honour my contract by formalising my decision by giving Woking Borough Council 28 days notice in writing at the next Rodden Homes Board meeting, so allowing continuity until my replacement is formalised. Just about, thank you. My thanks to all who have faith in me, especially all our residents who will continue to serve to the best of my ability. They deserve the best. Sadly, I do not believe they are getting it from this Conservative administration.
Thank you, Gary. Stuart, actually, we're out of time now, Stuart. Got 3 minutes.
I'll be brief, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Well, I'd like to say thank you, Gary, and I'm sorry you got a bit confused here. We've been looking at the strategy of what we do with these companies. I'm talking as the chairman of the holding company that represents the council. We're looking at the strategy and how we can improve on what we've got. And just because your contract came to an end after 2 years doesn't mean there was anybody's picking on you. I just want to get the record straight. And thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chair, to get the record straight, I was issued a new contract that says month by month, so it's not something that's going on.
I understand that you'd like to take it out of chamber.
So we discussed.
Obviously, there's a disagreement.
Right. Okay. And I'm also saying that actually, when it comes to bringing some new sites for these housing companies to work on, I'm pleased to say that later this month, the executive will be looking at putting the Wellington Road Station Road site, which is down the road from here, and also the Woodley Age Concern site. So we are starting to look at some of the council-owned companies that we've got available. And also, I'd just like to finally say that year to date, the income has reached over £1.5 million, reflecting a real growth coming from these companies, and also the income from July was over $350,000. So I think we're doing some of the right things, but I'm happy to take those other pieces offline that we've just been discussing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay. Right, we're moving to item 50 on the agenda, which is members' question times. It would help if you could ask this question standing in your name, and the 2-minute rule, everybody. So, first question, Gary Cowan.
I'll ask the question standing in your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. It's keeping me busy tonight. It's good. Thank you very much. Obviously, interesting subject. In simple terms, the answer to your question is no. In tackling our strategy plan-making responsibility, the Council has continued to follow government legislative and policy requirements. So we have planned for no more than we should have based upon these requirements. We've always estimated housing need based on government policy and guidance, and we've been regularly challenged and tested on appeals. And in not one of these instances has the inspector said that we've delivered too much housing. On the contrary, we have seen the numbers increase. it is demonstrably clear that this context the Council has done its statutory duty. But that doesn't mean it's right. As regards to the revised National Planning Policy Framework and associated guidance, the Government has, as expected, introduced a standardised methodology for calculating housing need across England. It uses the National Household Projection for each local authority and applies an affordability adjustment based on median house prices and earnings. It is therefore entirely independent from any past housing estimates. So this is a change. The NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, requires our future policies to meet the housing needs calculated by the standardised methodology, unless there is agreement with other local authorities for some need to be met elsewhere. And I've yet, in the 3 or 4 months that I've been involved with that, found any come running to us saying, can we have some of your numbers? Housing need would be recalculated annually as the new data on house prices and incomes become available, and the Government publishes new national household projections. The exact figure will therefore change regularly, bringing a challenge on how we plan. A new set of national household projections is imminent. These are expected to show slower household growth, leading to a lower overall housing need across England, and potentially a lower figure for Working Borough. Whilst confirming the standardised methodology, however, the Government has indicated that adjustments will be considered. This is in order to ensure the output of the methodology meets the Government's well-published 300,000 additional homes per year target. I am sure that all members, on behalf of our residents, would join me in stating that this situation, which brings continued uncertainty, is wholly unsatisfactory and undermines our efforts to plan properly for the long term. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do you have a supplementary, Gary?
Yes. It's interesting, you have 2 petitions tonight on housing numbers, and there's already a substantial one within the process. Stuart did say as Conservative government legislation and policy. I would challenge that, because what I would say is that Woking Borough Council never challenged the housing numbers that were imposed on them, or after the core strategy was agreed. It never ever challenged the numbers ever. It never ever did a deal with black and white.
Can I ask a question, Gary?
Yes, I'll be very simplistic. When will the smoke and mirrors end, and when will this madness end? Because everything that is being said in this chamber is being done through stealth, without consultation with residents, and it's a disgrace.
Well, I think the question is what are we going to do about it? And the answer is we're just about to go and talk to all the residents and tell them what we've had in the local plan put in. But we did fight appeals, I think, Gary. I think you may be around in that time when we fought appeals on the numbers. We're not accepting the numbers. I personally, and I know members of certainly my group will support me here, and I know we've had the member steering group with our colleagues. We think the numbers are ridiculous, but we're waiting until we've got all our facts together, and we intend to challenge those numbers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris Smith.
I will answer questions standing in my name.
Thank you, Chris. The Council's Highway Maintenance Programme sets out to address those schemes that are priorities for delivery in any financial year. However, this programme is published in draft and will always change following detailed assessment of each location. I can confirm that we plan to accommodate the resurfacing of Red Hatch Drive in this year's structural maintenance programme. The structural maintenance programme will commence from the second week of October for a period of 2 weeks. The work on Red Hatch Drive currently expected to be carried out during the week commencing the 15th of October, weather permitting. Resurfacing will take 1 day to complete under a full road closure, and residents will be notified in advance. There will be further minor works after the resurfacing to replace road markings and adjust ironworks.
Thank you, Anthony. Do you have a supplementary, Chris?
It's good news that Red Hatch is kind of back on the programme after being delayed from August. But there have been several kind of communication issues around highways in Hillside. Will the new contract improve kind of the communication we're seeing around these issues?
As I said earlier, I think with the new mapping system and its access through both computers and from mobile phones, I think you'll find that the residents will be much better informed, not only of office road resurfacing, but also of when roads have to be, or utilities have to do work on the network. So in short, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name, which for the benefit of people who are watching this on the film is about the process for applying for blue badges.
Thank you.
I think this one's got missed somewhere along the line.
Can't say anything.
I'm going to have to give you an answer. I'm sorry. This has been missed completely in the system.
You can ask a supplementary.
I can, because you'll need to answer this one as well, Anthony, which is we are, for the benefit of people, I know part of the answer, which is we are changing our processes to use the gov.uk site ultimately. How much effort has been put into looking at using other sites and resources rather than providing information and processes ourselves in order to save our own resources?
I think the answer to that is we provide it ourselves where it's most appropriate. And if it's more appropriate to use something else, then we'll do that.
Lindsay Ferris?
I'd like to ask the question in my name, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, please, Councillor Ferris, to clarify which contract or project you're referring to so that I can give you an accurate and specific answer?
My question related to a number of contracts, including the joint Wokingham Borough Council, Wokingham Town Council contract covering the recent marketplace refurbishment. So my question is, can you confirm how much of the contingency above the 3.8 million originally allocated to this project has already been used by each council?
Thank you very much indeed. I can answer part of that question, but I'll have to give you a written answer about the contingency amounts. In terms of the two councils, Wokingham Borough Council and Wokingham Town Council, as you know, have been working together collaboratively in their partnership since around 2016 with a view to implementing the vision of creating a high quality public realm as set out in the Wokingham Town Centre Master Plan. This has been produced through a process which is a high quality piece of public realm, albeit following some delays, and which were obviously largely due to some ground conditions. The scheme was based on the extensive public participation in preparing relevant documents and policies, all of which were funded by the developer contributions. The contract was with Balfour Beatty, and it is an NEC engineering and construction contract based upon the standard template for this type of work, and contains both an end date and an agreed price. So I'm not sure about your comments about the contract being open-ended in your question, as now notes that. In particular, with regards to the Section 106 monies, the agreed funds, any such strategic contributions to facilitate facilities available to all residents of the borough are legitimately spent in accordance with the relevant agreements for the purposes to which the money was allocated. This is the case in respect to the agreements to which you, I believe, refer to. The allocations were made through our business as usual procedures have been followed. We allocate Section 106 contributions to the key priorities of the Council as set out in the capital programme. Previously, a number of contributions, which I believe you're referring to, were allocated to the Twyford Station Master Plan project. But unfortunately, I'm sure that you know that this project was not ready to progress. And due to the end dates on these development contributions expiring, these allocated funds would have actually ended up going back to the developer if they hadn't been used. This time, it was agreed that the developer funds would be put towards the Wokingham Town Centre regeneration project. So in this instance, I hope that you'll agree that it was a good use of money, and that this time it was reasonable financial management rather than simply handing the money back to the developer in this instance using it in this fashion.
Been asked a question, can I answer it?
Thank you. Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the question that is standing in my name, which is asking the Leader of the Council to join me in congratulating working on Borough Council staff and the police in the way they have handled recent traveller incursions across the borough.
Well, I'm going to answer this one because actually it's my area under housing. Thank you very much for your question, Clive. I would heartily agree with you. I'm very pleased with the way the officers have dealt with the traveller incursions. Our WBC team deals with incursions as quickly and as effectively as possible, primarily with the Thames Valley Police, but also other stakeholders like parish and town councils, private landowners and businesses affected by incursions. As you're aware, Woking Borough Council, as the Chief Constable said earlier, has introduced an updated policy which takes account of joint protocol with Thames Valley Police, a positive step in joint working. As I would have said in my exec statement if I'd managed to give it, the borough has seen quite a few disruptive traveller incursions over the summer. It is very frustrating for residents, and the removal and clear-up time is time-consuming and expensive for the council. Where the police do not use the Section 61 powers, borough officers are taking an increasingly robust approach to the issue and now using non-court bailiffs rather than the courts to accelerate the process of removal. The non-court bailiffs are slightly more expensive, but it's actually a lot quicker, and it removes nuisance from the residents quicker. So I'm hoping that we've used that a couple of times, and in future we will get better and better at dealing with traveller incursions. I must say, however, that I think nobody would particularly mind travellers if they didn't make a mess. It's the mess and the damage and the criminal damage that is the problem.
Thank you, Pauline. Do you have a supplementary comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Pauline, for generally agreeing with me. It's quite nice that we can agree from time to time. Often police officers put themselves in dangerous situations when dealing with traveller incursions. I actually witnessed it myself in Early just a few weeks ago. But do you agree with me that the failure of the government to properly fund the police service, and the Chief Constable confirmed tonight that he's lost in real terms 100 million, which is 25% of his budget,
That's the
that this has... Am I not interrupting? That this has resulted in manpower shortages that contribute to making it increasingly difficult for the police to deal with traveller incursions in a timely manner.
Thank you, Clive, for that question. I also know about that particular incursion because I live just down the road from it. I can assure you that I was straight on the email to the Police and Crime Commissioner to see what could be done about it to support the police, and actually even at 11 o'clock at night he did respond to his emails. Since then I've brought up the question with Kit Malthouse, who's the new housing minister, to see what can be done to actually give the police more powers to do something about incursions. I think a lot of it is to do with deterrence rather than actually moving people on. The reason I think partly the police are reluctant to move people on is they just move to another place and then they have to be moved again and again and again. I think the important thing with the legislation is to have some deterrent effect so that people don't arrive in the first place and particularly do not create criminal damage. So I think the real issue is deterrence and legislation, not necessarily the number of police.
Pauline. David Hand.
Can I ask Councillor Pollock the question standing in my name?
Thank you, David. Smart motorway will add the smart motorway on the M4 will add 1,800 car movements an hour when it is completed. So this will reduce congestion, but I'm afraid only in 2022.
Exactly. Congestion's now.
However, in theory, because there will continue to be 3 lanes each way, the current capacity of the M4 will be maintained during the construction process of the smart motorway. The other issue I think we have, as you allude to, is traffic growth arising from new housing and general growth. However, when the core strategy was adopted in 2010, the proposed developments, which I think you referred to and I'm well aware of, were designed to mitigate their own impacts, including developments at Winnersh and Chinfield. The Council is in the process of delivering a programme of £124 million in major road infrastructure, which include the Winner's Relief Road Phase 1 and the Winner's Relief Road Phase 2, as well as the Eastern Relief Road in Shinfield, and the Arborfield Relief Road, and the North and Southern Distributor Road, which I admit doesn't actually contribute much in your area or in mine, but other members here, it is very relevant. So this infrastructure is being delivered to support this housing and the highway network, but the full benefits of this, unfortunately, won't be realised until everything's completed, which will be a few years hence.
Can you supplementary, David?
I asked you specifically what effects could happen around Early and Lower Early, and certainly the new traffic lights that we have just come down from Winnersh have worsened rather than improved the situation. What is the council going to do about the fact that people are sitting there for hours, certainly half hour, good half hour, people trying to depending where they come from and what time they're at, because it's getting ridiculous.
I am well aware of the struggles with the road network, particularly at peak times. I think, as you're aware, the dualling of Lower Early Way between those lights that you referred to and the roundabout is planned to commence shortly. And again, once that has been completed, I think that it will improve things a little bit. However, I think generally speaking, we need to let the Winnersh Relief Road Phase 1 bed in, and we need to get Winnersh Relief Road Phase 2 actually constructed. And then I think that some of the issues that you're currently experiencing will improve.
Thank you, Anthony. Rachel Burgess.
Thank you. My residents have raised concerns with regard to the safety of the new pedestrian crossings in the town centre marketplace. The crossings themselves are the same colour as the surrounding pedestrian area. There are significant concerns that children will mistake the crossings for a pedestrian path as the roadway is not sufficiently distinct from the pavement. Was the colour of the crossings raised as a safety risk during the design phase? And if so, what were deemed to be the mitigating factors before the designs were approved?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Rachel. In the interest of brevity at this time of night, I'd refer you to the answer I gave to Sarah Kerr earlier on, which I think covers all the factors that you've raised.
Do you want to supplement?
I do, yeah. But considering the number of concerns that have been raised about this, including a petition regarding the safety of the crossings, what action will the Council Executive take to allay these concerns, such as changing the design to make the roadway distinct from the pavement?
It's fair to say that there is a safety audit being carried out on this new setup in the marketplace, and until we've had the results of that, I cannot comment at this time.
Guy Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Woking Borough Council was a market failure protocol which is operated jointly with Optalis. The purpose of the protocol is to set out roles and responsibilities in event of market failure in an adult social care service. This includes having good knowledge of the provider market in this area, offering assistance to the provider, and if it's facing closure, and what happens when a provider closes. The Director of Adult Social Care has nominated a Deputy Director to oversee and coordinate the closure process. The Director will ensure that there's sufficient resources available in terms of staff and finance to safely and appropriately support individuals to coordinate an appropriate response. An announcement to staff at Liberty of Early Care House was made on Monday the 10th of September. A letter went out to families to arrive on the same day. This was followed by a residents' meeting on Tuesday the 11th. Woking Borough Council were in attendance at the residents' meeting and will support individually, hopefully with a family member present, to fully discuss the situation, including options and preferences. Optalis self-funded broker will offer support to secure
extra care or other residential homes.
Thank you, Richard. Guy, do you have a supplementary?
Not now, I'll take it offline.
Thank you very much. Okay. Pauline, would you like to...
I'll make my proposal now.
Okay. Have you got a seconder for that? Can we vote on that? All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. So we're going to extend the meeting by half an hour. Just to confirm, when we finish?
11 o'clock.
Oh, to 11. Yeah. To 11. Okay, item 51, minutes of committee meetings and all matters. You take that side, and you take that side.
Okay.
Okay, you can put your hands down now. Okay, we'll start with Lindsay.
Okay, I'll shorten my question. In Twyford, we have been pressing for a community hub and new library and have constantly been told there is no money available. Well, up to £200,000 in Section 106 money has been diverted from the northern parishes, which could have been used towards that facility in Twyford. Would the appropriate executive member like to comment?
As you know, there have been a number of meetings over the years to try and resolve that issue as far as Twyford is concerned. That process has certainly not reached a conclusion as yet. So at present there is no long-term solution. Appreciating that the current library is less than ideal and that we can do with better facilities.
Charlie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the executive member for Highways and Transport. It's regarding installation of a pedestrian crossing across in my Bulbush and Whitegate ward across Spitfire Way, linking the Red Road estate with the other side of the road. Just a bit of background: the funding was agreed under Section 106. According to the original agreement, it was supposed to be completed before the start of the school term in September. Clearly this hasn't happened. Can you please provide an update when this installation will start?
Thank you, Shahid. Yes, I'm afraid, as you're aware, I've only recently taken over this portfolio, and this is an item that seems to have slipped through the net this year, so apologies for that. I would expect to have this in place within 12 months.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and happy birthday, Charlotte. As a present, I've got a question for you. Residents in my ward are concerned about the state of the council leadership. I am looking at the benches in front of me. There's no executive member for finance, there's no deputy member for finance, and there's no member for 21st Century Council. It's like a Mary Celeste executive sailing on with plenty of empty berths. What can you do to reassure residents in my ward, like Keith B, Chris S, Shahid Y, Harry B? What can you do to assure these residents that that you do have the necessary leadership powers to restore some direction from this drifting ship?
Thank you very much for your question. I think the council.
Who's playing with the mic?
Someone's playing with mics. I think members should be reassured by the fact that we've nearly got a full bench here this evening, and the state of the leadership is very strong this evening. And I think you'll see that actually we've got good support in terms of the leadership by the number of different things we've taken through this evening, not only being supported by our own party, but also being supported cross-party as well. I was really pleased this evening to announce my new deputy leader, and also I'll be pleased to announce the new finance person in the next coming weeks, and also the 21st Century Council executive member. But I will keep you abreast of those details as soon as I have them. But in the meantime, watch this space.
Thank you. Laura, please move on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for Environment. Please can you explain what this council is doing to improve Southlake and the surrounding areas?
Thank you, Laura, for your question. There's quite a number of things that have been going on down Southlake over the last number of months. So I've got a list there, which is quite a list actually, for you to write it down. So carried out work to deal with the odour from the lake in 2016, prepared a number of sections of pathways to include the play area and sections up to the picnic area to prevent standing water during wet periods. As requested by the engineer, reshaped and redressed the pond and dam as it had been walked along and flattened, and also carried out peripheral works to maintain the integrity of the base of the parking stroke dam. Cleared the pond area of vegetation, and in August removed all the litter from around the area. Numerous tree works around the lake have been carried out, and specifically on the pond stroke dam. Repairs to the surfacing inside the play area. The lake treatment was carried out in 2017 by our countryside service. A significant clearance behind the dam screening to remove vegetation and rubbish. Secured funding to resurface the pathway from the barn to the picnic area, which works are planned to be carried out before the onset of winter, hopefully it will be next week. The hedges around the children's play area are also due for cutting this week. So a fair number of items. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Ian Pitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for the Executive Member for Highways. Being fairly new to this, Anthony, I'll lead you into it. WBC and some local representatives are looking at a potential rebuild of California Crossroads in Finchampston, South. We had a meeting last night where we considered the latest design. WBC is now planning an exhibition for December. This needs to be turned into a public consultation, which differs from an exhibition. As according to R versus Brent, London Borough Council in 1985, consultation must be carried out at a time when proposals are at a formative stage. I also refer you to paragraph 3.1.5 of this council's constitution. The pace of design work means we are now in danger of moving beyond the formative stage without a public consultation having occurred. I am keen that we avoid a repetition of the mismatched timing of the design and public consultation stages of the school's crossing. Will you please ensure that a proper public consultation occurs rather than just an exhibition? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm happy to have a look at it. I'm afraid I'm not quite up to speed on all the details of it, though I think, as I've said before, I remember it from last time. So it's not something that's new, though I believe that some of the more grandiose plans that were kicking around a few, 10 years or so ago have been slightly changed. So I'm happy to work with you and your local colleagues around on the project, and I take your point around consultation.
Guy Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a question I'm sure it will be, but it's regarding the Saltdale Centre. Residents have approached me concerning a rumour of a threat to the Silverdale Centre, could you reassure residents and squash what I hope is a facetious rumour, and that those who are responsible for spreading this rumour discuss matters with councils and the Borough Council before deliberately spreading panic with residents?
I'll take that one, I think it's me. The Silverdale Centre in Early, as you are aware, there is a lease in place between Main Early School and Woking Borough Council related to that property. And Early Town Council, for the last 3 years, I think it is 4 years, has operated that centre and continues to do so. Since taking over the centre, Early Town Council has invested quite a lot of money and time in the facility and has improved things, and the facility is now a valuable and well-used addition to the centres that there are in Early. The things like bike workshop and music sessions and so on going on there. So a very important part of the community. Woking Borough Council is not aware of any threat of closure of that facility. Whoever is spreading the rumours, I think it's actually a Liberal leaflet that's gone out, let's be clear about that. So if they're aware of any issue that shows that there is a threat of closure, perhaps they'll be kind enough to let me have that information so we can act on it. If not, then as usual we're just creating worry unnecessarily in people. Last night at Early Town Council, we also discussed this facility, the Policy and Resources Committee. Early Town Council, as with Woking Borough Council, is not aware of any threat of closure of that facility. Thank you.
Carl,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will the executive member for Highways and Transport join me in congratulating two residents in my ward, Angie Burnish and Shirley Boyd, who campaigned so successfully for the return of the 19A and C subsidised bus service?
I recall, I think, having read when I first took over this role, that there were changes to that bus service. I think probably there were more people than just those two who were involved in the campaign, but I think everyone who is involved in the campaign around the bus services that are relevant and appropriate to the local community deserves to be congratulated. And particularly, I think, as we got a better result at the end of the day, which I think is the important piece.
Thank you, Anthony. Tim Hawkson.
Thank you very much. Mine's a ward question for the exec member of Highways. There are a number of roads in Hawkton which are in desperate need of resurfacing. As this council tonight has approved the Highways and Transportation Term Service contract, would I be correct in thinking that it will give the council greater opportunity to undertake additional work? If so, please can I make the case for my ward to be first in line?
Thank you, Tim, for your question. I have a feeling that there are 53 other councillors in this chamber who have similar aspirations. I would point out that we do assess the quality of the roads and those roads that need to be resurfaced or patched or repaired on a technical basis so as to avoid political favouritism. However, I am sure that your ward has a great need, and I'm happy to confirm that the additional resources that I look to squeeze out of this new contract will be available to deal with those roads that have the highest priority to be resurfaced or repaired. And if that is Hawkton, then I'm sure you will be here. Thank you.
No, was it you?
Change your name?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, David. My ward question is for the executive member for the environment. I've been getting constant and numerous contacts from Evandon's residents concerned about rat problems across the ward. I believe this to be a problem that is plaguing not only Evandens but many other parts of the borough. Leaving this growing and widespread issue to individual households to sort out is not working. Will you look into a better policy and solution to this environmental health issue as a matter of urgency, please?
As you're aware, it's not a service that the council provides these days, so it is up to residents to deal with their infestations locally. The Public Protection Service can provide advice, but that's as far as that goes. So if we to look at anything more widely, then it would have to be a policy decision of this council. So I think you've asked for it to be looked at. We'll have a look at it, but that's the current policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is from Councillor Iverson and it's to do with the former Woodley Edge concern site. It is in two parts. One, can you provide an update on what is happening on the site? Two, can you please reassure me that board member will be kept fully briefed on any future development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you've seen in the earlier statements, that site will be brought forward to executive for potential development if that gets approved. That will be a mixture of social housing of various different sorts. I'll give you more details afterwards. I can absolutely reassure you that we'll be very, very interested in making sure all the Woodley members are engaged in this. It's a really important thing to do. It's really good to get more affordable housing for our residents. It's very, very important to increase the housing supply. The local authority companies will be doing a great job. We want to do more of it. And yes, we'll be very much keen to talk to you and your residents, of course, about what the requirements they might have are.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't panic, everybody. This is a minutes question. It's a question on the minutes of the executive on the 28th of August, and I think it must be for Charlotte. That was an extraordinary executive meeting which considered the council plan engagement document. And as part of that document, there were a number of public consultation sessions, which has already been referred to tonight. Could you tell me, please, how many people have turned up to each of those sessions?
Thank you very much for your question, Prue. I don't have the exact figures tonight, but I think at Dinton Pastures it was around about between 70 and 90, I believe. Twyford had a good turnout as well, and also Woodley in the precinct. Obviously tomorrow is Friday, so the numbers in Woking Town we expect also to be similar, maybe even more. And then in early, obviously that stand has been set up in Asda on a Saturday morning, so we expect there to be a significant number of people going through there. The locations have been picked on purpose on days that are there to attract a huge number of people, hopefully. But also, obviously, as I said in my speech before, we want to encourage as many people as possible to participate. So please do try and promote it as much as possible through, either knocking on the door with the leaflets. Everyone's received them, but they are available, the leaflets here. And if you've got any other ways that you think that you can promote it until the end of the month, then please do get in touch. Thank you.
Imogen.
Good evening. Back in autumn last year, residents of Meadow Road in Embrook submitted a petition to the Highways team for with their agreement on proposed parking restrictions for a traffic regulation order. They've been waiting over 9 months now for yellow paint to appear on their road, and they are still waiting. A application for TRO changes has also been put in for Caroline Drive, which is blighted with commuter parking, and there's one for the terrace and a few other places as well. Please can you explain why we have petitions with agreements with the residents, why it's taking so long to actually see the changes being implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. Actually, it's pertinent. I would have talked about this if I'd had time for my executive statement, so thank you for giving me an opportunity to explain. As members are probably aware, the whole TRO system was amended a couple of years ago, so that effectively we have one master TRO. And a decision was taken to allow the new system to bed in for 12 months. And therefore no changes have been made for the first 12 months of this new system. Since I was appointed, I have been working with the relevant officer to batch up the 90 or so amendments to this TRO, which then need to be published in the newspaper, and we have comments that need to be received on them. If there aren't any comments, we'll implement. If there are comments, we have to review them. So at some point, and we'll get the details, and you can talk to me offline, I will find out where they are in the process. If the residents don't object to them, then we'll get them in more quickly. If people object to them, then we'll have to go through a process and review it. So it's in process. I expect to have probably completed by Christmas this current batch. So hopefully, having done the technical bit of advertising and consultation, we may get some of them done before Christmas, otherwise it will be early in the new year.
A question for Paul Jorgensen, the Executive Member for Housing. The possible development of Chalfont Woods, also known as Area DD, is of interest to both Hillside and Hawkton residents. Will you please confirm that the publicising of the public consultation about the development will include a leaflet to be delivered to every home in both Hillside and Hawkton wards, giving the date, time and location of the public meeting or meetings, and will be delivered to all these homes with at least 3 weeks' notice?
David, I can assure you that I think you've already asked this question in writing to officers, or you or Clyde have. I can assure you that there will be a letter to all affected residents. They will give them plenty of time to come along. The plan is to have a planning for real exercise. As you know, Area DD has always been zoned for development. It was zoned for development even when the Liberals were in charge of this council, and during that period the Liberals actually put forward a proposal that showed development and then backed off. I've got the minutes from the meeting, so you obviously decided it wasn't a good idea, having seen the council having proposed it in the first place. This land has always been zoned for development. We'd really like to talk to local residents through a planning for real process about what the options are for this land. I would also like to point out that this is not development of woodland. This is development of scrubland, which was, as I say, zoned for development since the point Lower Earley was first planned. There's been a lot of misleading literature put out about development. I think you said at one point of Chalfont Park, David. You've put you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Moving on to number 52, motions.
You didn't ask me for my question.
I'm afraid we're out of time, Clive. I tried to share it fairly. Well, I've got 30 minutes. If you want to make a proposal, maybe you'd like to speak to Constitution people to change it. Okay, item 52 on the agenda. We're at the motion. Motion 407. Gary Kell. Would you like to make a proposal motion?
Yeah, thank you. I think residents mistakenly believe...
Sorry, Gary, I missed that. Have you got a second there?
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you. Residents mistakenly believe that if a TPO a tree is a TPO, it's safe from destruction. But what they don't know is that a planning application involving removal of a tree with a TPO on it, be it for highways or housing, the tree will go and there's no real consultation. Like false news, a so-called consultation takes place, but the council disregards any comments submitted and even approves the request to remove a tree before the closing date of that so-called consultation. The council goes even further by saying to borough and parish council residents, as they know nothing about trees, there's no need to consult with them. They take notice of bodies like the Wildlife Trust and a highly respected Woking Tree Association. The council is also responsible by not keeping records of trees they've allowed to be felled, and if you think of the amount of development going on in the borough, records of what is happening to our trees is quite important. It's reluctant to put TPOs on trees unless they're under threat, and we can all understand how developers can handle that. And green root tree felled seem to have trees felled as a sport without any reference from the council. This is an opportunity to get one of our most disgraceful policies amended, so residents can have confidence on just one part of a planning system that is clearly wrong. I ask all the members to support my motion to council. The wording in the motion is pretty simplistic, and it's designed to give protection to our trees and give our residents confidence in our planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Lindsay, would you like to speak?
I'll defer for the moment.
Okay, members, who would like to speak? David, sorry. Charlotte, Jenny Crew. Charlotte, can you just put your hands up on the other side? Sorry, Andy, Crew, and everything. Thank you. Okay, Crew.
Thank you. Bearing in mind the time, I'm not going to use the whole 3 minutes. The reason I'm speaking on this motion is to draw attention to two things that have happened in Winnersh. The first is that in the last couple of weeks, Highways England, without so much as a letter to warn affected residents, have chopped down all the trees along the M4 embankment as part of their smart motorway works. We've lost the visual screening of the motorway, we've lost the noise screening, we've lost the screening from pollution, and we have no idea when we're going to get the trees back. I realise that the council can't control what Highways England does, but we do have a working relationship with them, and I'm hoping that officers will talk to them to make sure that they do their planned replanting scheme for the embankment as soon as possible. So you can see that I absolutely support the sentiments in the first paragraph of the motion. And the second thing is that earlier this year I inquired about some trees and bushes that had disappeared. Those trees and bushes were on Highways land, which is land the council owns and controls. So I thought it was reasonable to ask our tree officers what had happened to them. I was told nobody had any idea. That is just not good enough, and it's the reason why I absolutely support the second paragraph of the motion as well.
Keith Baker. Thank you, Chairman. Gary's comments have been concentrating on planning development. Prue's comments have been about the Borough Council. I think if you look at the very first sentence and the second sentence in the last paragraph, it's talking about all trees. Trees in my garden, in your garden, and somebody else's garden. Therefore, that is a massive burden. Consort even says in there that those are to be felled, for trees which are to be felled, you have to have consultation. Well, my next door neighbour had a tree felled. She shouldn't have to go to a consultation. It's a nonsense. So from this motion, where there's an interesting sentiment, to be fair, it has to go for all trees that are felled, if you support it, not just the Borough Council, not just an authority like Highways England. It's got to be fair to everyone. That is a totally unworkable system. So on that basis, I cannot support this. Thank you, Keith. Andy Croy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Gary, for once again bringing an issue of concern of many residents in the borough to the attention of the council. We can always rely on you to do that. And it's great to see the Liberal Democrats supporting Gary as well. And hopefully some of the Conservative members will not follow Keith and will find a way of supporting this. Everybody loves trees. Not everybody loves the Borough Council. The Borough Council has a reputation problem. People don't think we're listening. They lose trees and they blame the council. We lost the trees in Elms Field. People accuse the Borough Council of not listening. We had the consultation on the school controllers. People said the Borough Council is not listening. This motion gives, thank you Chris, this motion gives us a chance to restore a little bit of faith and trust in the Borough Council by introducing a little bit more transparency into what happens to trees in the planning process. So I will be voting for this motion, and once again, Gary, thank you very, very much for bringing this in front of us.
Charlotte, say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the sentiment, Gary, that you are trying to achieve in this motion, particularly as someone who has spent my art career documenting particular trees through photography and painting.
Do have a new system.
David, it's no good. You have to set up a new one in.
No, it's gone. It's gone completely.
Mine's still alive.
I'm just going to shout.
Stand here, it works.
No, that's not working. No, okay, that was working now. I'll start again. I wanted to start by saying that, Gary, I completely understand the sentiments that you're trying to aim to get towards in this motion, and particularly as somebody that documents trees through my art, through painting and also photography, and particularly significant trees and very special ones. However, if we adopted this policy, this motion, and put it into policy as it's currently worded, we literally would be talking about every single tree in the borough. That's trees in your garden, my garden, and simply every single tree. And in order to do that, I'd simply ask how many trees would we have to plant in order to process all of the paperwork that we needed in order to take all of these consultations through the council. It's just not practical in terms of the way that it's worded. I support the sentiment, as I said, but it really isn't practical. And I also ask, how many officers would we need in order to support this policy as it was issued to? And at the expense of what? Is it at the expense of our most vulnerable in our society and those that we have a statutory duty to support? I really hope after this meeting that we can get together and try and put together some sensible wording, that we can come together and really push for what I think this is all about, and put together a policy that the whole of the council can support.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I support Gary's motion, certainly for the trees that are within the council's control. I understand what you're saying about people's gardens. I would like to ensure that any of the trees that are felled by this council are replaced by trees of a suitable native species. In my walks through parks, I can see many young trees that have been planted with great fanfare and enthusiasm, only to see them die in the following years due to neglect. This year's dry summer has taken some of these due to lack of water, but there does not seem to be any method of getting these trees that were used to replace other trees replaced. Therefore, I would also like to see that any trees that are planted are monitored and cared for during the years required for them to establish themselves. And it's probably more than many, but yes, thank you.
Thank you. David Slide.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reinforce the point made by Councillor Baker. I mean, this really is a nonsense motion, and it doesn't define a tree. It is autumn at the moment. Acorns keep falling off my oak tree. If I don't pick up the acorns, each one seems to grow into a tree. Now, is the council supposed to come down and do a survey of every acorn that actually sort of sprouts? And so I pull up dozens of oak trees, I pull up dozens of holly trees. Now, what control should there be for that? So we've got to find a tree, so that the motion must fall on that basis.
Thank you, David. David Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Trees were very much are very much in my interest, and especially when I was the executive member for Norman.
Environment.
I think he might actually. Is it my job?
Someone said we need a light anyway.
Where did you sign from? Come on, Angus. Everybody knows what you meant, Angus.
I can see the sentiment of the motion, but I think it is impractical. Just a couple of points. One, Elms Field, there was extensive consultation with all bodies. This is 3-4 years ago, and a lot of what came back from the consultation, because I was very much involved with it, was taken into account. Yes, we've lost a few significant trees. Yes, there'll be enormous replanting. The other thing that Prue mentioned about the tree team are not involved with the council's trees. Another officer is. They should have passed that on to them.
They did, and they didn't know.
Well, I think the issue is if you start to control things more, you'll lead to more malpractice. In my ward very recently, a lovely site with a whole bunch of trees, which if they had been seen to be at risk, I'm sure would have engendered a TPO, were ringed one weekend. That is, just cutting around the base, so that even if the officers had come along, then they would have been lost. The other thing is that the fine for taking down a TPO tree is totally disproportionate to the value to a developer. Overall then, I think we do need to continue our interest in our trees. We need to find a practical way of doing that best and keeping our people, our residents informed about how they can help us, because we don't have lots of people even going around to see these trees, and we rely on them to tell us. So I'm afraid I go along with my colleagues and find this an impractical proposition.
Richard Delinsky.
Just shout. I'll just shout. I've got a strong voice. Without repeating what's already been said already, it's just totally impractical to actually ask our officers to actually map out every single tree in the borough. Would be a ridiculous exercise. What actually works is proactive communities in preventing trees from being felled. In Loddon, we've got a developer there that clearly likes to cut down trees. So we had a number of our residents come forward and ask the Loddon ward members to actually do something about it, and we managed to get a TPO not just on one tree but on a whole area, which included, I think, probably over 100 trees. The process was very easy. It was not complicated. And to introduce a system that includes long-winded consultations that also would involve developers, be unnecessarily complicated, as already said, impractical, costly, would have just delayed everything. I support what my colleagues have been saying on this side of the house. It's totally impractical. It wouldn't work. I agree with the sentiment. It's an emotive issue, and I wish, Gary, you would actually work with us to redraft the motion and maybe bring it forward on another occasion. But on this occasion, it's not practical.
Okay, Anthony Pollock. No? Pauline.
I completely agree with my colleagues. Unfortunately, this motion is impractical. As the proud host for 3 veteran trees in our garden, I'd like to make a plug for the Woking District Veteran Tree Association, who document veteran trees and keep electronic records of them. It's a really good way of bringing to the attention of the public trees that need to be protected. So if anybody else has got old trees in their garden, please make sure you get them documented by the Veteran Tree Association. It may not be a TPO, but at least it will make them more obvious to other people, and hopefully will help protect them.
Okay, Sean, sorry about that.
What power is it anyone got working here? Thank you. It seems that there are 3 main strands to this motion. One, reviewing our tree policies. We are in the process, in any case, of reviewing our policies related to the local plan, so that's underway. to formally consult on all trees proposed to be felled. But as we've heard before, that is pretty impractical, and we couldn't legally insist on that outside development proposals. The statutory process around TPOs and or conservation areas does not include a requirement to undertake public consultation. So the thing that you mentioned earlier, Gary, as a consultation, we've already discussed this, was not a consultation, it was informing people of what was happening. And the third strand is to maintain a record of trees felled within the borough. Well, obviously we have to rely on individual reporting, with the reporting by residents to log the trees that they've felled. And it's unlikely to be successful. I'll just echo what Pauline said really about people like the Wildlife Trust and the Veteran Tree Association. The officers in this council work very closely with those organisations. Countryside Service works extremely closely with the Veteran Tree Association in this area, for example. I know that Angus has been closely involved in the past as well. So it's not fair to say that we don't listen to those bodies. We absolutely do. We support them and we discuss things regularly with them and get them involved. So I propose that we have to vote this motion down because of all the reasons that have been stated. But Gary, I think it would be helpful if you sat down with the relevant officers. You've obviously got concerns, so let's sit down and see if we can drive at the things that are possible. But this motion tonight, I'm afraid I can't support.
Gary, you all right to reply?
No, come back to me, I'm secondary.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I've been listening to the comments, and I think some of the comments are more to do with who's proposed the motion than anything else. I do, because this motion was proposed at the last council meeting and resubmitted. So it's not a new motion to the council, so you would have had a chance to look at it at the last council meeting and come back. And if you had made a suggested amendment this evening along the lines of this parts of the motion you have a problem with and amended it so that it was achievable, I would have much more respect for some of the comments that were made this evening, because to put a motion forward again and it's been debated, it's going to be 6 months before it can come back. So I'm very disappointed that we've got this stage. If you put an amendment forward, I remember in Twyford being contacted a few years ago by some residents who were absolutely distraught. There were 3 lovely trees in a certain part of Twyford that were in the process of being cut down. We all thought they had tree preservation orders on them. Some of them did, but not all of them, and they knew exactly which ones to cut down. And we were aghast to find out why they didn't. And I think we do need to widen the issue, because the point, Richard, you made about a wider TPO, I remember going to a meeting not very long ago where it was mentioned that you couldn't.
I'm not quite sure what order this is under, so...
I'm secretary.
No, I understand you're secretary, I'm quite happy with you speaking. I think you've heard the sentiment from this side that we would actually like to support the protection of trees, but we find this motion untenable. If you would like to propose, as you say it's so easy, if you would like to propose an amendment which would be accepted, that would allow us to take account of all the issues that we've outlined in terms of the documentation, then I would invite you to do so.
We are in danger of running out of time. Let me warn you.
Well, as I supported the motion, it was in its original state. It was for you to come forward with an amendment, not me. That's the point.
You're happy with...
So I'm just making the point that you have made comments to say that you don't like it, but you haven't come forward positively, you've been negative.
We are running out of time.
I'll just say, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Gary, you're right.
Picking up very quickly on what Keith Baker said, he's actually right. But I did say it's an opportunity to try and get one of our most disgraceful policies amended. And I would agree with Keith that the wording in the second paragraph wasn't helpful, and for that I apologise. What I actually should have said was the council must maintain proper records of all TPO trees felled, or TPO trees which are to be felled, or they're situated in the conservation area, etc., etc. Then what we will be talking about is the reference and the whole motion was with respect to TPO trees. There's nothing to do with acorns growing in people's backyards or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for your recognition that parts of the motion weren't appropriate and couldn't really be implemented. Might I ask you to withdraw the motion, amend it, and bring it back at the next council meeting so that we can all support it, having worked with Norman and the officers to make sure that it's something that is supported?
Yes. Go ahead to do that. Okay, so what's been proposed is that we don't go to a vote. Gary withdraws the motion and rewords it and brings it back at a later date. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes. Yeah, vote.
Okay. Okay, that's carried. Thank you, Gary. Okay. So next one is 409, proposer Pauline Yorkerson.
I'll have to be quick, bearing in mind it's 11:15. So I won't read the motion out. Basically, it's to ask Reading buses to allow representatives from the local authority areas in which Reading Bus operates to attend their board meetings in observer status. We know that Reading Buses is a company. We know that we can't have a vote on that, but we think that it would be very helpful to have a more wider representation of the users of the buses on the board. In Working Borough, we've got many commercial and subsidised bus services operated by Reading Bus. Currently, services operate in Almafield, Wokingham, Shinfield, Spencerswood, Risley, 3 Mile Cross, Winnersh, Woodley, and of course Earley. There have been a lot of changes to routing of bus services recently, including those serving Earley. One in particular was a recent change. In January this year, they changed the bus route for the number 22 to serve Caversham as well as Lower Earley. One of our veteran early town councillors, John Armstrong, said at the time, "This will never work. They've tried it before, and the old 20 route, and it was so unreliable due to traffic they had to revert to the old arrangement." Sure enough, the change didn't work. The Red 22 now only operates between Caversham and Reading Town Centre. 3 of the things that drive higher usage of public transport services are reliability, frequency, and familiarity with the route. These regular changes to bus routes mean that at least 2 of these criteria are not met. I think it would be very useful to have representation from the Borough Council on the Reading Bus Board to avoid costly mistakes being made and our residents being confused by regular changes. The other issue with the lack of stability is, of course, that our council taxpayers have to pay for the relocation of bus stops, which have been left stranded on the wrong end of the route or rendered completely redundant. Local knowledge is key to understanding the routes and problems, and it's also helpful for us to understand the constraints which the bus company operate under. I would therefore like to ask all councillors to support this motion to ask Reading Bus for a closer working relationship and an observer seat on their board.
Pauline, I apologise, I didn't ask you for a second. It's such good. I'm sure we can find somebody who would like. Guy? It's okay. Do you want to speak, Guy?
Yes, I'll speak quickly now. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, one of the great advantages that Earley has is its regular bus service into Reading, Almost, Wokingham and Bracknell. And many residents take advantage of this regular bus service to commute into those locations. The 21 and 4 bus services in Earley are regular, and modern buses are an excellent way to travel into those towns. However, there are still issues, and it is quite common for Reading buses to completely ignore representations from Earley and Wokingham as a result. So I will be supporting this motion. I was fortunate to have a reasonably good working relationship personally with the past 2 CEOs of Reading buses, aided in part through my work with Redibus. But there's only so far that sort of relationship can go. Let's again take the example of the 19B that goes down Beach Lane. Previously it was decided to be linked with a bus to Caversham Heights and become the 22, and in spite of warnings from WBC councillors, early town councillors, residents groups such as Miriam, and even myself, directly to the CEO, warning them they would not work due to time constraints, they went ahead anyway. The result, the same as it was on the old 20 back in 2008. The 22 was often late, quite often completely cancelled at random without any knowledge to residents.
If you want to vote on this, I suggest you...
So, local knowledge is a crucial contributor and helps the service succeed. So, I will support this motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Lindsay Ferris. Any?
I have an amendment. and following on from the comment from Pauline, I looked at this motion, I largely agree with it. I've put a suggestion, I've got copies, I shall pass them around. I hope we've got time to deal with it. It's in bold. While you're having a look, I'll read it out. It's to insert the words in the sentence which begins, therefore this council calls on Reading buses to allow representatives from local authority areas, and I've included ward members where a specific issue has been raised by local residents, and the rest is everything else is unchanged.
Lindsay, I'd like to accept your amendment. I think got an S missing on issues.
Are there any questions on the amendment?
I'm quite happy to accept, Pauline has accepted the amendment if we're going to go to
with an S on the end of it.
with an S somewhere, and ward members, is it? Whatever.
No, specific issues.
Issues, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Chris.
I think that this will just be a short statement to say that I feel there's been a general issue over the years with Reading Borough Council not considering impacts of changes on other local authorities and even on their own residents. For example, kind of when they put parking meters on Pepper Lane, it moved a lot of the university parking into Harcourt and Falstaff onto Beach Lane and other areas within Hillside and of course Maiden Early. And also on things such as the IDR, there wasn't a consideration when it was one way about the effects on Oxfordshire, Wokingham and West Berkshire, and especially with a proposed congestion charge within Reading, there hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, any consultation with other neighbouring authorities or even within Reading itself. So I think there's just a general feeling that if Reading can be a more considerate neighbour and actually understand that some of its decisions do have impacts on on other local residents, considering that Reading usually classify early as part of Reading when they're ever advertising anything.
Okay, thank you very much. Eddie. Thank you. I'm not surprised Pauline didn't want to read this motion out. It's amateurish and it's unprofessional. You cannot be an observer at something and have a voice. In your speech you mentioned being on the board. So what is it? Are you an observer? Are you on the board? What is it? You seem very, very confused about that. There's something that sticks in my throat about an executive member who was responsible for my residents losing a much valued service. And don't smile at me about it. You put a lot of people in a lot of pain about the bus service they lost, and now suddenly you and your party are posing as champions of public transport. All your party wants to do is destroy it. Now I've got very good news for you. While one of your members of Parliament is holding the other one hostage, our Member of Parliament in Reading East is bringing forth a Labour policy, which the next Labour government will introduce, which will introduce free bus travel for under 25s. So if you want to tell your residents and give them good news about bus policy, tell them to look forward to the next Labour government when we receive proper support for public transport. And finally, it's not just Reading buses which should I've had my time. I've had my time.
Can you sit down, please, Andy? Thank you. Carl.
I'm still on. This seems to be confusing two entities here. The first sentence talks about a local authority being cooperative. The second paragraph is talking about Reading Buses, which is a commercial company. It is not Reading Borough Council. It is at arm's length. Conservative government in 1985 had a Transport Act that separated and deregulated the entire system. This is your system, okay? It's not what we wanted. Okay, so you want oversight of the local buses? Well, it's all there. It's in the public transport plan, it's in the local transport plan, it's the ones that you voted for, it's all in there. Lots of things, countless mentions of working with, discussing, engaging, raising issues, instigating discussions with bus operators on behalf of residents. Even mention of a bus operator forum which it recommends to continue attending. So this must exist, you already have a say. And this has been policy for at least 7 years. So this motion seems to be an admission you aren't doing your job. As a trade unionist, I'm always very interested in getting representation on boards for workers and for users of services. But I suspect that wasn't your intention here. But the main problem with this motion, and this is the amendment as well, because it doesn't change, is that it singles out one commercial operator. But surely what applies to Reading buses needs to apply to Courtney's and Arriva and Horseman and any other future operator. So, you know, if your answer to that is in the negative, then your supposed motivation to give residents a say in their bus services becomes very suspect indeed.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the events in the background behind this, which is disputes about commercial and non-commercial bus routes, happen all the time. And I blame not the bus company, not this council, not Reading Council, but the person who's actually to blame, which is Margaret Thatcher. There was, don't get too excited. It was her government that deregulated buses in the 1985 Transport Act and stopped councils running bus services. And Labour had 13 years in government. They didn't.
rebranding.
This will never get sorted out properly unless local authorities are given back some power to control buses, which happens to be the Lib Dem policy. We are just going to see more and more disputes until that happens, and fewer and fewer buses that properly serve the people who want to travel.
Pauline, you do have time for reply.
Thank you. I don't propose to say anything more than to propose a recorded vote.
Okay, so we go. Can we sit down, everybody? Okay.
Yeah, as amended.
Alice, start. Yes, we're starting. Alice is not in.
Keith Baker?
4.
Nora? 4. Chris? Yes, Barry?
4.
Lou?
4.
Rachel Burns? Against? Jenny? 4. Ola Corinne? Gary Cowan?
Abstain.
Andy Boyd?
Against.
Richard Lindsay?
4.
Carl?
Against.
Lindsay?
In favour?
9.
4.
Charlotte? 4. John? Russell? David? David Heck?
4.
Pauline? 4. Emma? Not here. Tim Holton?
4.
Graham?
4.
John Jarvis not here. Clive Jones?
4.
Norman?
4.
Pauline? 4. John?
Abstain.
Diane? 4. Abdul? Charles? Ken?
Oh, 4.
Philip?
4.
Stuart?
4.
Barry?
4.
Ian?
4.
Anthony?
4.
Helen? Not here.
She can't.
Margaret Richards?
4.
Angus?
4.
Imogen? 4. Rochelle?
4.
David?
4.
Chris?
4.
Wayne Smith?
4.
Bill?
Abstain.
And Shahid?
4.
carried.
Thank you. That vote is carried. And thank you very much. You've taken it right to the wire. Sorry.
Mr Mayor, members who wanted to hold the executive to account tonight have been denied that opportunity. Members who wanted to put motions before the council have also been denied that opportunity. Is this Conservative democracy in action, Mr Mayor?
Can I remind you who proposed the extension?
Can I just answer that? I tried to do everything as fairly as possible. Unfortunately, we were subjected to the police and he had too much to say to that, I think, and that's really what's messing us.